Penguin Bookst Chati Long Silence Shashi Deshpandey was born in Dharwad, India, daughter of their renowned dramatist and Sanskrit scholar, Sriranga. At the age of 15, she went to Bombay, where she graduated in economics. She then moved to Bangalore, where she gained a degree in law. The early years of her marriage were largely given over to the care of her young sons, but she took a course in journalism and for a time worked on a magazine. Her writing career only began in earnest in 1970, initially with short stories, of which several volumes have been published. She is also the author of 4 children's books and 4 previous novels. The Dark Holds No Terrors, If I Die Today, Come You and Be Dead, and Roots and Shadows, which won a prize for the Best Indian Novel of 1982-83. Shashi Deshpandey lives in Bangalore with her pathologist husband and has recently completed her MA in English Literature. SHSHIDSHPND. That long SILENCPNGON, BOOKSUTHORS note, since readers may find the number of relations and their differentiations rather confusing, it may help to know that the narrator, Jaya's father and mother, are Appa and AI. Her elder brother, Dinkar, is Dada. Her paternal grandmother is Aji. Her father's brothers are collectively the Kakas, and their wives the Kakis. Jaya's maternal grandmother is other Aji. Her maternal uncles are Shanju Mama and Makarand Mama, and her aunt, Shanju Mama's wife, is Vanita Mami. If I were a man and cared to know the world I lived in, I almost think it would make me a shade uneasy, the weight of that long silence off on half the world. Elizabeth Robbins, in a speech to the WWSL, 1907 Part 1, to achieve anything, to become anything, you've got to be hard and ruthless. Yes, even if you want to be a saint, if you want to love the whole world, you've got to stop loving individual human beings first. And if they love you and they bleed when you show them love them, not specially, well, so much the worse for them. There's just no other way of being a saint, or a painter, a writer. Why am I thinking of these things now? Is it because I find myself struggling for words? Strange, I've always found writing easy. Words came to me with a facility that pleased me, sometimes shamed me, too. It seemed too easy. But now, for some reason, I am reminded of the process of childbirth. The only memory of it that remains with me is that of fear, a fear that I was losing control over my own body. And so I resisted. Am I resisting now? Perhaps. For I'm not writing of all those innocent young girls I've written of till now, girls who ultimately mate themselves with the right men. Nor am I writing a story of a callous, insensitive husband and a sensitive, suffering wife. I'm writing of us, of Mohan and me. And I know this, you can never be the heroine of your own story. Self-revelation is a cruel process. The real picture thereof you never emerges. Looking for it is as bewildering as trying to know how you really look. 10 different mirrors show you 10 different faces. Face is like your name, Kamat had said to me, and I had been fascinated. How? I had asked him, eager to know how I looked to others. The mirror is always treacherous. It shows you only what you want to see. And perhaps others too see in your face only what they want to see, yet the fascination of seeing yourself in the mirror, of knowing how you look to others, never palls. Perhaps it is wrong to write from the inside. Perhaps what I have to do is see myself, us, from a distance. This has happened to me before. There have been times when I've had this queer sensation of being detached and distant from my own self. Times when I've been able to spur at 2 distinct strands, my experience and my awareness of that experience. Can Edo this with our story? Do I have the necessary ruthlessness? Give us your biodata, a magazine had asked me once. And I had found myself agonizing over what I could write, what there was in my life that meant something. Finally, when I had sifted out what I had thought were irrelevant facts, only these had remained. I was born. My father died when I was 15. I got married to Mohan. I have 2 children and I did not let a third live. Maybe this is enough to start off with. I can take off from here. When I was a child, film music was considered so outrage that it was banned by our radio. Looking back, I realize it was part of the pseudo-Puritanism of that time, just after Gandhi's death. Those lilting songs were enjoyable and frivolous, therefore wicked. Perhaps it was this that made the whole business of listening to them, from Radio Salon, such a shameful and furtive affair. Yes, it had to be furtive for my father, whose own tastes in music had been austerely classical, had despised my addiction to what he called that disgusting mush. He had tried his best to wean me from the habit, to make me love Palaskar and Fayyaz Khan instead of Rafi and Lata, but he had failed. "What poor taste you have, Jaya," I can remember him saying to me once. The shame I had felt then survived long. "There's no need to hurry," Mohan often said when we were getting ready to go to a movie. "At how worst, we'll miss the ads, and who wants to see them anyway?" I did, but I never dared to confess it to him. What if he too said, "What poor taste you have, Jaya?" Instead, I replied cravenly, "Yes, no need to hurry," trying frantically, deviously to get there on time. The kid with the endearing mustache of milk, the tender, smiling mother rubbing Vicks on her son's chest, the even younger mother feeding her baby with Ferks, the brother and sister running hand in hand toadoring, smiling parents and chocolates, I loved them all. Those cozy, smiling, happy families in their gleaming homes spelt sheer poetry tome. For me, they were the fairy tales in which people live happily ever after. The evening after we came here, Mohan and I, to this dad our flat, is only 10 days since then. A picture of the four of us at a meal comido me in the same way, like a glossy, colored advertising visual. Westmauld, we laughed. I, the mother, served them with love and care. Mohan, the head of the family, smiled indulgently, and the children were lively and playful. A visual, yes, it had to be only that, for I could not find the words to match the picture. When I tried, what came through was our normal dinner-time conversation, the scum of hostility floating to the top, marring a placid, clean surface, the illusion of happiness. Yes, I had to let it go. Perhaps the truth is that I was not then remote enough from the scene I was fantasizing about to sustain the illusion. Perhaps, who knows? After some years' time may play a disappearing trick with the ugliness and the bickering, leaving only an idyllic picture behind. But then, at that moment, I had to admit the truth to myself, that I had often found family life unendurable. Worse than anything else had been the boredom of the unchanging pattern, the unending monotony. You remember now how often I had sighed for a catastrophe, a disaster. No, not a personal one, but anything to shake us out of our dull grooves. The 8-planet configuration, which they had said presaged a disaster, had roused my hopes once. Why was it, I had often wondered, that wars always took place in other countries? Tidal waves and earthquakes occurred in far-off, unknown places. That murder, adultery, and heroism had their places in other people's lives, never in ours. The very words disaster, wrongdoing, retribution seemed wholly irrelevant to our lives. Like the chorus of Greek drama, we were distanced from suffering. For us, there was just living one foot in front of another, until death came to use in a natural form. But finally it came to me, after all, my own special disaster. It came like a prize packet, neatly tied with colored ribbons, a gift to Mephram, my husband. And I was at a loss. I did not know what I was to do with such a gift. It seemed to me impossible. Mohan had to be wrong. Life would go on for us as before, punctuated by dreary quarrels, the children's successes and failures, their estrangement from each other, from us, our resentment and bitterness, old age for us, perhaps widowhood for me. This was our future. Nothing else was possible for people like us. People like us? Now, what does that phrase remind me of? Oh yes, Mohan's story of those squatting women and children he saw in Delhi. Maybe we should have taken that story more seriously, as an omen. But nothing had stirred in me when I had heard the story from Mohan. I had been disinterested, indifferent. Yet I must admit that I had been curious about Mohan's exaggerated reaction to what I felt was not so extraordinary an incident too that had nothing to do with us. I had rarely seen Mohan so affected by something that did not concern him, his family, his job. Now I know that this incident that affected him so much precisely for this reason. He had felt threatened in some way by what he had seen. Those women were sitting on the bare ground, right in the dirt, mind you, not even a bit of a newspaper or a mat under them, just sitting there on the ground like beggars. Imagine, Jaya, people like yous in that situation, people like us. He hadn't needed to explain that. I had understood him. Well-educated, hard-working people in secure jobs, cushioned by insurance and provident funds, with 2 healthy, well-fed children going to good schools. They sat there silent, none of them spoke, not even the kids. Yes, that's what shocked me, Jaya, they had their kids with them. They just held up some placards, boards, painted at home. Maybe some of the kids had done that. You could see the paint trickling down from some of the letters. Those drops looked like tears. It was at that point, I now remember, that I had sat up and given Mohan my entire attention. Trickling paint that looked like tears. This from Mohan, who was never fanciful, who disdained the flowery, How as so proudly matter-of-fact all those boards said the same thing, we want justice. The women and children sat there with those boards, and they all looked as if they knew it was hopeless. They looked, he had searched for hours and come out finally with terrible. People gave them one quick look and then walked away. It was strange, Jaya, not one person stopped and stared. People just glanced at them and then hurried away. No one asked questions, no one made any comments. I myself had to hurry. I had an appointment with Kaushik at 11:3 and that man doesn't like to be kept waiting. But after we finished our work, I asked him about them. He told me they were army wives and children. Their husbands had been arrested for security reasons, spying, and they had been whisked away overnight without being allowed to meet their families. The families didn't even know where the men had been taken. And so there they were, on Thurode, letting everyone see what they were reduced to. I can't tell you, Jaya, what a terrible thing it was seeing those women and children reduced to that plight, sitting there like beggars. It was, and as if there was no other word he could ever use, he said it again. Terrible. We should have known it then, those women sitting with their children, hopelessness written on their faces. They should have been the warning signal telling us that it could fail after all. That the way you lived and what we were was no talisman against all the terrible, ugly things Wymagend happened only to other people. How could those men have done such a thing? Mohan had exclaimed the day he had told me about it. Imagine putting your family in such a situation. It seems totally irresponsible to me. Those words of Mohan. Perhaps I should have reminded him of them the day he told me what he had done and what was likely to happen to us. I should have thrown his own words back at him, paid him back for years of submission, the trodden worm turning. But have I ever been a trodden worm? The one who finds the coin first rules the other at home. The women of Mohan's family had told us, laughing, before initiating us into one more of those inane post-wedding ceremonial games. As we had begun, a mound of rice and a plate between us, I had deliberately dawdled, my fingers scarcely moving, while his had scrabbled frantically through the grains, groping for the coin. But it was I who had found the silver rupee first, which means nothing really, for he has been no worm either. Ours has been a delicately balanced relationship, so much so that we have even snipped off bits off ourselves to keep the scales on an even keel. A pair of bullocks yoked together, that was how I saw the two of us the day we came here. It was an eerie sensation I had while climbing up the stairs with him, as if there was for that one infinitesimal moment a pause in my being, and I, detached from myself, saw this, a pair of bullocks yoked together. Then the focus shifted, and there were instead a man and a woman climbing the dingy stairs of a drabbuilding in the heart of Bombay. A trail of garbage on the soiled cement stairs, cigarette butts, scraps off paper, bits of vegetable peel. And red stains, squirts of pond-stained spit on the wall, macabrely brightening up the dinginess. I can see those too now as one sees other people, their existence confined to that one moment, the man climbing gingerly, almost on tiptoe, the woman walking with the steadiness of familiarity, the dirt and ugliness obviously for her a normal part of the surroundings. On landing, the man stops. God, he says, his voice crisp and authoritative. Why doesn't someone clean up this place? The woman turns, looks at him, and his expression changes. He seems to wilt. They resume climbing. A woman descending the stairs, a huge garbage bin balanced nonchalantly on her head, looks at them curiously, stops and smiles. The man gives her a blank stare as if affronted by that smile, but it is not for him. It is for his companion, who smiles back. The man goes on and waits with a scarcely controlled impatience before the closed door of a flat, whileth two women converse. Poor Nayana, the woman says when she joins him, pregnant again. Have you ever seen her not pregnant? Her mother-in-law was just the same. The man's face has the blankness of indifference. Keys, he says, holding out his hand. But the woman, ignoring that importunate hand, it becomes that Ash continues to hold it out, takes some keys out of her bag and unlocks the door. Still ignoring him, she enters the flat. He continues to stand there for a moment, the hand held out. It now looks like a supplicatory gesture. And then abruptly he follows her in, closing the door firmly behind him. It is here that my vision fails. I cannot distance myself from us and what happened to us, however much I would like to do so. A pair of bullocks yoked together, a clever phrase, but can it substitute for the reality? A man and a woman married for 17 years, a couple with 2 children, a family somewhat like the one caught and preserved for posterity by the advertising visuals I so loved. But the reality was only this. We were two persons. A man, a woman. Nayana pregnant again, I said to him. But I knew he had noticed nothing, neither Nayana's swollen middle, nor her slim anklets that looked so incongruously girlish under that fecund swelling. I saw all that and more, that the silver anklets which had clinked so gaily while Nayane walked were gone. But this indifference to things that did not concern him had always been part of him. What was new was the frightened man who looked out from behind this wall of indifference. All his assurance had asserted him. Only once, for a moment, was he his old self. God, Hess said, why doesn't someone clean up this place? And for that moment had his old air of authority and confidence. Then the old self vanished, leaving behind a sad, bewildered man. In some curious way, I felt familiar with him too. It was as if I had often glimpsed him lurking in the wings, waiting for his cue to come onto the stage. Or did this sense of familiarity come from his resemblance to a Graham Greene character? A sad, obsessed man reconciled to failure, yes, I'd met him in books. Reconciled to failure. That seems cruel, but it's true, for why else would he have so quietly submitted to my refusal to give him theckies? No, I have to be honest with myself. It was not he who had relinquished his authority. It was I who no longer conceded any authority to him. But I have to be fair to myself as well. That was Nosodon, cruel volte-face on my part. No, it was part of the same subtle resistance I had offered, the guerrilla warfare I had waged for so many years. We all do it. It is part of family life. Rahul refusing to have his bath before meals, Ratty refusing to tell us who it was she was talking to on the phone, Appa crushing a raw onion and eating it with relish while Saptagiri Aji watched disapprovingly. Mohan, if I had spoken to him of these things, would have scorned such theories, such thoughts. He refuses to believe in these battles within families, though he carries within himself his own scars of guilt, remorse, and resentment. Once, trying to soften Rahul's hostility, trying to generalize to make it a non-issue, I had said, after all, Everson must fight his father to prove himself, every daughter her mother, nonsense. Mohan had retorted. The boy is spoilt. I never behaved that way to my father. Mohan has always had very clear ideas about himself. He was a dutiful son. He is a dutiful father, husband, brother. It had never mattered much to me until he said, it was for you and the children that I did this. I wanted you to have a good life. I wanted the children to have all those things I never had. Yes, now it comes back to me. It was at that moment that the first real emotion had entered into me. Anger. Until then, I had listened to him with a faint sense of bewilderment. I suppose it hadn't really penetrated, the thing he had been trying to tell me. Contracts, tenders, favors, commissions, what had these words to do with my life? How could these things affect us? There's going to be an inquiry, Mohan had said. I don't think I stand a chance. I'm finished. Both Agarwal and I are finished. Agarwal deserves it. He's been doing these things ever since he became secretary. He got me into. This, he got more out of it than I have done. He's responsible for the whole thing. Not I had said nothing. Perhaps mistaking my silence for accusation, Mohan had burst out with, I did it for you and the children. Later, much later, he had asked me, you remember Nair? For a moment I had circled round the name in bewilderment. And then, as if he had been waiting in the dark recesses of my mind to materialize at this moment, I had remembered Nair. Clearly. Who he was and what he had done and how he had died. How he had died, thinking of that, I had suddenly known what we could do. I had seen the picture, not with the vagueness of a dream or the dimness of a fantasy, but with the clarity and exactness with which one sees a movie. All the details clear, larger than life and in technicolor. Theffer of us roped together, walking into the sea, away from shame and disgrace. A peaceful and colorful death, and I had thought of the lemmings then. Wrongly perhaps, for I'm not too sure that the lemmings commit suicide. Maybe it isn't the death wish that drives them into the depths of the sea to die, but a kind of a mass altruism, unconscious of course, carried to the extreme. No, the lemmings didn't really fit, and even as I rejected them, Mohan had angrily rejected my suggestion. And the pleasing vision I had seen, the four of us walking peacefully into the sea in the mellow light of the setting sun, had disintegrated. From the debris another had emerged, a girl disparate, anguished, swimming back to the shore. Yes, one of Nair's children, a girl, had unbound herself from the rope that had harnessed the family together and struggled back to life. Thinking of that girl, I had known this escape was barred to us. But for Mohan, the idea was wholly impossible. Have you gone crazy, Jaya? Can you imagine the scandal? Yes, of course. There would be no audience walking away with tearful eyes from this movie. If anything, Mohan had clearly spelled out, Thanemini would spread faster and wider. I had cringed then under Mohan's ridicule, but now I have to laugh at my own fantasy. Yes, it was absurd. Could we have come to such a decision without squabbling? Could not even decide upon a meal or a movie without bickering. Could we have chosen death in such harmony? For Mohan, the thing had been far more simple. The idea was just plain stupid. The lemming drive, the death wish, is unknown to him. Did you never wish to die, to kill yourself? I had asked him curiously in the early days of our marriage, when I had been curious to know him, to know all of him, thinking then in my naivety that such a thing was possible. No, he had said, and then no again, firmly nailing his negative with a hammer of distaste. And I had been left with my question hanging like an obscenity between us. I had believed him then, but now I am not so sure. Surely there comes a moment in every human's life when he or she says, like the Sibyl, I wish to die, but a death pact. That had been too much for Mohan. We don't have to go to extremes, he had said to me with pedantictriness. Nair was a fool, he left himself too wide open. He was greedy for money. I've just accepted a few favors from people, Things are not too bad, I'm not that involved. Agarwal, I don't know how Agarwal slipped, he was always very careful. But this time, this man whose tender was rejected, he's related to the minister. That was bad luck. The minister is new, Agarwal didn't know him well. He's trying to meet him now to get the inquiry put off, and you? What can you do? Agarwal wants me to take leave for a while, he wants me to make myself unavailable. He had his plan ready. We'll stay in the Dadar flat for some time. Lucky the children are away. I remember now that he had assumed I would accompany him, had taken for granted my acquiescence in his plans. So had I Sita following her husband into exile, Savitri dogging death to reclaim her husband, Draupadi stoically sharing her husband's travails? No. What have I to do with these mythical women? I can't fool myself. The truth is simpler. Two bullocks yoked together, it is more comfortable for them to move in the same direction. To go in different directions would be painful. And what animal would voluntarily choose pain? There was one thing I hadn't bargained for when I had agreed to commeher with Mohan. The ghosts who sprang out at me the moment I entered, so many of them, Makarand Mama, AI, Dada and his friends, Rahul, a small, excited child, and Mohan himself telling me, we won't be here long. All these people seemed so real to me that I looked at Mohan wondering whether he could see them too. But the distaste on his face, the wrinkling of his nose, told me that his awareness was of something quite different. The place reeked of mildew and rot. The fetid stench off the garbage Nayana had just carried down the stairs had drifted in through the door and companionably joined the closed-in monsoon mustiness. We have to clean up, Mohan said, now naturally. We can't live in this mess. His fastidiousness, his passion for neatness and order had amazed Muhan we got married. In our home in Saptagiri, objects had cheerfully strayed away from their places, if they ever had any, and nobody had minded. Not Appa, so uncaring and unnoticing of trifling details, nor AI, always indolent and slapdash. The other two homes I knew had been just as bad. The town house in Saptagiri, where Aji lived with Kakas, Appa's two brothers, and their families, was austere and bare, pared down, like Aji's own life, to the essentials. And I's home in Ambagayan, where other Raji, Shanjumama and Vanitamami lived, was chaos with its rarely made beds and clothes piled onto the larger clothes horse until it threatened to collapse. Perhaps it was these things, these people among whom I grew up, that made neatness and order a hard discipline for me. But then I've seen the home in Saptagiri in which Mohan lived as a boy, the inner room with its haphazardly piled mattresses, a faint odor of urine still clinging to them, the string tied from wall to wall on which the family, all of them except Mohan, threw their clothes without folding them. Come on, Mohan said irritably. What are you waiting for? The lemmings, I thought of them again then. Do they hesitate when the time comes? Or do they rush headlong to extinction? I joined Mohan, and methodically, the two of us moved about putting things in order. I hesitated only once when I came upon a shoe, Thane's side of it filled with an unhealthy growth of fungus. My fingers twitched with horror. Finally, I pushed it with my foot outside Thedor, leaving it there for Nayana to carry away. Mohan opened Thedor's and windows, flicking the dust off surfaces while I briskly swept the place. The fan moved at its fastest. Nevertheless, we were bathed in sweat by the time we had done. "I'll have a bath," Mohan said. Pulling his shirt off, I sat under the fan, letting the sweat dry on me. He went into the toilet, and soon I heard the familiar clang, clang, clang. As the water gushed out, the ghosts rushed out at me with a savagery that was overwhelming. And then Ick knew that ghosts are not, as I had imagined, always other people. Theghost most fearful to confront is the ghost of one's old self. This was what I saw, the ghost of a woman who had scrubbed and cleaned and taken an inordinate pride in her achievements, even in a toilet free from stains and smells. I remembered, as I sat there, how strenuously and earnestly I had cleaned the footrests of the toilet when we first moved in. Each day before my bath I had scrubbed at them, going into the tiny blackened crevices with an old toothbrush. It had taken months to get rid of most of the stains. And then, with Cusum, they had come back. "My God, Cusum, why have you let the place get so dirty?" Dramatically, I had flung the tiny window wide open. "It's stinking. Can't you at least open the window?" "And flush each time I can't," she had confessed humbly. "I pull the chain, but nothing happens. Look." How I had enjoyed the moment, it came back to me clearly, both my triumph and my pleasure in it, and Cusum's crushed, bewildered face. "Look, this is all you have to do." Clang, clang, clang. I had pulled the chain 3 times, and the water had gushed out, rust-colored, showing how long it had been stored in cistern. We all learnt the trick. We all remembered it. Even Rahula's a little boy got the knack of it. But Cusum never could. Mohan came out of the bathroom wrapped in his towel, his sacred thread almost lost in the black, wet curls on his chest and back. "Don't you want to have a bath?" he asked me, and the ghosts faded away. I'm wrong, I thought. It isn't frightening meeting the ghost of your past self. It's awkward, like having a stranger thrusting herself on you, claiming a relationship you're unwilling to allow. And just as I got rid of that house-proud woman who had been me, it came to me that the woman had had a name as well. Suhasini. "Your name is like your face," Kamat had said, and I had asked at him, "How? It's small and sharp and clear like your face," he had said. But why is Kamat coming into this story of mine? He doesn't belong her. Yet here he is, ruthlessly elbowing himself into this story of ours, refusing to be left out. I can see him now, leaning forwards, putting out a finger and drawing a delicate, slanting line along my cheekbones, my jaw, the finger moving to my lips, hovering over them, not touching them. All clean, clear lines. "Your eyebrows, too." The fingers had drawn straight lines in the air above my brows. Then he had sat back and gazed seriously at my face. "Only your eyes," he had said, and his voice had carried the impersonal regret of an artist. "Only your eyes do not have this exactitude." He had offered me the word, I remember, with an apologetic smile. "They're too hesitant, wavering, uncertain. Physical touching is for me a momentous thing. It was only Appa who hugged me as a child, and after him there was Mohan. We were husband and wife, and he could hold me, touch me, caress me. But it was never a casual or light-hearted thing for either of us. And Thenthai's man, I can remember how his gift of casual, physical contact that amazed me. His unawareness of my shock the first time he did Ithed told me what touching meant to him. Nothing. And yet that Dehai's dispassionate tone, his detached touch, had somehow angered me, provoked me enough to make me blurt out, "Actually, my name isn't Jair at all. Not now, I mean. It's Suhasini. Where did that come from? Marriage. It's the name Mohan gave me when we got married. Suhasini." He'd said it questioningly, repeated it, and finally, with a well, had begun to laugh. That laughter had finished off Suhasini as far as I was concerned. She'd never really existed anyway. Nobody had ever called me by that name, not even Mohan. Though, when he wrote my name, it had been Suhasini, not Jaya. And if I disowned the name, he had never failed to say reproachfully, "I chose that name for you." Yes, but long before that Appa had chosen Jaya for me. It was the day of my birth that gave me my name. To any other parent, a child born on the 3rd of September 1939 would have seemed an ill-omened child. Not to Appa. "I named you Jaya," he said. "Jaya for victory." Appa never had any doubts. He often told us about the fact that victory would come, nor about whose victory it was going to be. He had given up high studies in Gandhi's name, burnt a few foreign clothes, and worn a Gandhi cap for a few years. But Churchill himself couldn't have been more certain of an ultimate Allied victory. "I named you Jaya. Jaya for victory." I was Jaya, but I had been Suhasini as well. I can see her now, the Suhasini who was distinct from Jaya, a soft, smiling, placid, motherly woman. A woman who lovingly nurtured her family. A woman who coped. When I think of her in this way, I know who it is that Suhasina reminds me of. She's like the sparrow in the story of the crow and the sparrow, which we were told as soon as we got into the tell me a story phase. It was the first story told to us, the first I can remember, the first perhaps told to all children. I had thought I would carry on the tradition and begin Rahul with this own. And then I realized that I'd forgotten how the story ended. I had asked AI about it. How does the story end? The one about the crow and the sparrow. What story? What crow and sparrow? What are you talking about? AI isn't one of those mothers who remembers every moment, every incident of her children's infancies. In fact, she often gets hopelessly confused about our photographs as Bobbies, mixing up Dada, Ravi, and me. That story, AI, about the foolish crow who built his house of dung and the wise sparrow who built hers of wax. And when it rained, the house of wax stood firm while the crow's house was washed away. And the poor crow, shivering and sodden, went to the sparrow's house and knocked on the door, calling, "Let me in, sister, let me in." And the sparrow called back, "Wait a minute, my baby has just woken up." After a while, the crow knocked again, pleading, "Let me in, sister, let me in." And the sparrow said, "Wait a minute, I'm feeding my baby." So the story goes on, the foolish, credulous crow standing out there in the rain, begging to be let in, while Sister Sparrow spins out her excuses. Does the sparrow let the crow in finally? I had asked AI. "Oh yes, she does," AI had replied with her putting up with Jaya's strangeness face. "Yes, of course she does." But there's something. No, what is it? I've forgotten. It's so long since I told anyone the story. I don't think I ever told Ravi any stories now. What is it? Chef frowned, trying to remember, and I waited patiently. Yes, now Inno. What happens is that the sparrow finally says, "Come in, you're all wet, aren't you, poor fellow?" And she points to the pan on which she's just made the chapatis. "Warm yourself there," she says, and the silly crow hops onto it. Andy's burnt to death. What an ugly, sadistic story to tell children, I had thought in fury. Now I wonder whether it's something even worse, a story carrying a dreadful moral which all children imbibe unconsciously. There's the foolish, improvident, irresponsible, gullible crow, and there's the cautious, self-centered, worldly-wise, dutiful, shrewd sparrow. The survivor is the sparrow who keeps the crow waiting forwards, and finally, in the guise of providing sympathy and shelter, kills the crow. It occurs to me now that perhaps I did a wiser thing than I knew in rejecting this story as a bedtime tale for Rahul. Imagine what it could do to a little boy, this story in which the victim, the crow, is a male and the victorious sparrow a female. But perhaps it would have been more deadly for Ratty. I have a feeling that even if little boys can forget this story, little girls never will. They will store this story in their subconscious, their unconscious, or whatever, and eventually they will become that damnably, insufferably priggish sparrow looking after their homes, their bobbies, and to hell with the rest of the world. Stay at home, look after your babies, keep out the rest of the world, and you're safe. That poor idiotic woman Suhasini believed in this. I know better now. I know that safety is always unattainable. You're never safe. It seemed to me, as I drifted between sleep and waking, that I could hear the distant roar of the sea. Then, almost instantly, I was out of it, with a clear realization of my surroundings. That was not the sea but the frantic rushing of an early, local, a suburban train. And I was not in the large bedroom of our Churchgate home, but in the small crowded room of Macarand Mama's Dadar flat. Yet there was none off that frightening disorientation that overcomes me when I wake up in a strange place and can't connect myself to the world. The things around me were all familiar and reassuring. The dressing table with its famished mirror that looked a ghostly blank in the half-light of the room, the large bare table, the high steel bed, every squeak of which was known to me. I lay at ease with myself and watched the room grow lighter. Markers, I thought. That's what they are, these things in our lives, telling us where we are. Like the rows of lights on a runway. As long as we can see them, we don't have to worry about getting lost. But what happens if you get lost in spite of these things? The springs squeaked as he turned over, a compact and cautious movement that brought him closer to me. His arm lay across my chest. It felt heavy, I could not breathe. Gently I lifted it. He mumbled something, and then his eyes were suddenly open, staring into mine. Jaya? It was here, the panic that comes on waking in unfamiliar surroundings. Yes, he mumbled something, looked about him vaguely, then sat up abruptly, pushing both his hands through his hair. For a moment I couldn't remember, I was wondering where I was. Did you sleep well? Okay. I couldn't confess that I slept like a log the night through. Shall I get the tea, Un? He lay down again and yawned hugely. Do you have enna milk? I can get some from Mukta. I'm sure Jija can get me some in the afternoon. He wasn't listening to me. He had curled himself into his blanket and lay with his eyes closed. I had to wake him up when I came back with tea. He drank it without any comment on the ugly, chipped mug I'd brought it in. When I returned from the kitchen after washing up, Hugh was standing and staring at the calendar on the wall. Hitching up his pajamas, he asked me when are Rahul and Ratty returning, 15th night. School opens on the 17th. He rubbed his cheek reflectively, still staring at the calendar. The rasping sound set my teeth on edge. That's 12 days from now. We were silent, tiptoeing around those 12 days. And then deliberately, I could see the effort he made. He steered away from that thought. He asked me with a smile, whose doing is this? He pointed to the haldi and kumkum stains on the bland face of a gaudily-colored Lakshmi decorating the calendar. Oh, that was Kusum. She was missing her gods, I suppose. His smile faded, his face became mask-like. Poor Kusum, even after her death she aroused so much antipathy. He had tried hard to dissuade me from having her with us when she fell ill. Why do you want to burden yourself with her? She isn't your responsibility, is she? And it's not that she's related to you, either. No, she isn't. As a child I had disliked Kusum, a dislike that was later tempered tone indifferent contempt. Even at the last, when she seemed so pitiful, with her mind disoriented, she had managed to irritate me. And yet I had resisted when Mohan had tried to stop me from helping her. For the first time in years, I had really fought him. No, she's no relation of mine, but she is Vanita Mommy's niece. My aunt's niece, my mother's brother's wife's niece, my uncle's wife's niece. How distant all these variations sounded, making it definite that Kusum was no relation of mine at all. But when I said Vanita Mommy's Kusum, that put our relationship in the right perspective. It gave her a claim on me. Look, Jaya, I'm not being unreasonable. Have I ever come in the way off your helping any of your people? I've always allowed you to do what you want. But this woman isn't just sick, she's mentally sick. Is it wise to have her at home? Think of the children. With that I was defeated. The children, the words have been our final argument, our sacred cow, our justification for everything, even for living. Everything we did or didn't was for the children. No wonder it occurs to me now that they grow up to be such sullen monsters, burdened with all this unselfishness of ours. All right then, I'll put her up in the Dadar flat, but she'll have to stay with us until she's a bit better. And when I take her there, I planned, I'll try to be with her as much as I can. Jija will help me. I'm sure Mukta also will. I can ask Kusum's eldest, Lada, to come for a while. They had seemed astonished by my tenacity, Mohan, A.I. Dada Ravi. Such different persons, my husband, my mother, my two brothers. It had amused me to see how alike they were in their objections. Why do you want to get involved? They said. And think of the children. As if Kusum was a raving maniac, out to destroy my children, instead off being a poor, frightened, defeated woman, whose urge for destruction had been turned inwards. Vanita Mommy had been the only one who had had no doubts. She had taken it for granted that I would help Kusum. And when Kusum died, it was she who had consoled me. What can you do against what was written on that poor girl's forehead? After all, you did your best. Had I done that, Jaya, I must go, Kusum had said to me abruptly, a begging note in her voice. I had been looking in irritation at the room on which Kusum had managed to impress her own brand of squalor in the few days she had lived in it. Her sari lay on the bed, not with the pleat spread out in a pleasing concertina, but ignominiously crushed and crumpled. A frayed, grimy bra trailed disconsolately across the arm of a chair. A comb with an ugly hunk of hair in it leered at me from the dressing table. Jaya, I must go. Where? Home. To my children, she had said, her hands moving involuntarily to her flat chest, as if she was the mother of an infant she was breastfeeding, as if those breasts were, in fact, gorged with milk. When, instead, her youngest was nearly 10, and perhaps despised her mother as much as all the others except Lada did. But that ugly gesture, so distasteful to me, had been typical of Kusum. Even as a gaunt, unattractive girl, Kusum had emphasized her femaleness. She had aped a grown woman, swinging her skinny hips from side to side in a grotesque parody of a woman's walk. She had begun wearing a sari when she was barely 13, pulling the end of it scrupulously round her shoulders, covering herself fully, as if to hide her barely perceptible breasts from possibly lecherous males. Whenever Dada was about, She would sidle past him with a kind of exaggerate modesty that had both enraged me and made me want to laugh. "Why don't you teach our Cusum some English, Jaya? Her English is very weak," Vanita Mommy used to ask me. "Why don't you ask your husband to get our Cusum's husband a better job? Why don't you take her Cusum to a lady doctor, poor thing? She has 3 daughters, at least let the 4th be a son. Why don't you take Cusum to Bombay and show her to a good doctor? She's behaving funnily. And there was Cusum with her. I must go home. Ignore her," I used to say loftily when Cusum was being silly. But thy's importunate demand of, "I want to go home." "You can't, the doctors won't allow it, your treatment isn't over." "I don't need any treatment, I'm all right." All right. Better maybe than the frightfully blank-faced automaton her. Brother Dilip had brought to me, "But you know Lotta will be here soon. I want to see all my children, they don't need you," I had said brutally. What right did she have to make her suffering so loud, so obvious? "They are managing quite well without you, but I need them." I had no answer to that. I had written to Dilip, who had taken Haraway, and so she had gone home to die. She had thrown herself into a well, in which I heard later the springs had dried up. And so Shehed died, not of drowning, but of a broken neck. What difference did that make? None really, but that was typical of Cusum. "I have some bad news for you," AI had written to me. Cusum had gone to her in-laws for a few days, and the day before her husband was to take her back home, she threw herself into a well and died. Your aunt keeps moaning and crying, but it was a good thing in a way. She was of no use to anyone after she went crazy. Nobody needed her. Of no use to anyone. It had frightened me. I had felt as if I had never known until then the extent of my mother's ruthlessness. I had savagely torn the letter into tiny bits and flung them into the waste paper basket. One scrap had fallen out, and as I picked it up I had seen the words, "God's will." Furiously I had stuffed that into the basket too. But now I wonder perhaps it was ordained that Cusum should die that way. Maybe her fate was sealed when she was born to those feckless, hopeless parents off hers. A father who cared for nothing but smoking and movies, Homer worked a day in his life. A mother whose world centered round her youngest, the baby on her lap, while the rest of her kids ran around in wild abandon, unkempt, dirty, unfed. What chance did Cusum have with parents like that? But there's Dilip, Cusum's brother Dilip, born of the same parents, who has, from being a detestable, brash boy, become a suave, successful man. But then Dilip always created an aura of success around himself. Even when he failed his matriculation, his mother fondly said, "Our Dilip is a non-matric," making a positive qualification of his failure. "Everyone is scared of our Dilip," Vanita Mommy told me a few years back. "He's the leader of the unions and the factory owners give him money to keep him pleased. He has a lot of black money now." Even AI, who finds it hard to put up with Vanita Mommy's bragging of our Dilip, admires Dilip. I've seen them together, heard their tones of fond intimacy, the jokes, the laughter, the greatness, the success of Dilip, and how he came to it, grabbed it rather, makes an interesting sociological phenomenon. We visited his house the last time I went to Ambagayon, a brand new house, one off those pink and green bungalows that have mushroomed on the outskirts of the city. A large photograph of his mother hangs in the hall, a garland of fresh flowers festooning it. "Gets fresh flowers every day, however expensive they are," Vanita Mommy had whispered to me admiringly, wistfully, envying, it seemed, her dead sister, who had been our poor venue when alive. The wondrous alchemy of Dilip has transformed even his dead mother so that she looks positive and confident in the picture, quite unlike the woman I remember, sitting with a baby on her outstretched legs, looking up at us in vague surprise when we entered, though, according to Vanita Mommy, it was her poor venue who had invited us. In fact, from Vanita Mommy's words it seemed that poor venue would be quite heartbroken if we didn't go to her house. But venue, on the contrary, had seemed quite astonished to see us there. Actually, she had looked at her own children, Dilip, Cusum, Shayla, and the others, in the same way as if she wondered who they were and why they were there. The only reality for her wast baby who lay on her outstretched legs. It's funny. Now that I think of it, how her bobbies were always there, never on her lap, as if she was preparing them for life by denying them the softness of her lap, giving them, instead, the hardness of her shins. And now Dilip's house is littered with overstuffed sofas, bolsters, cushions. Yes, Dilip was born for success. From the very beginning he was ready to do anything that helped him to get on. His motto was in his own execrable English, Whose father's what goes? Whereas Cusum carried the aura of defeat about her from her birth. That plunge into the well was there in her eyes the day she tagged along behind us as we went for a movie. Dada and I, it was there the day she peered at us out off Vanita Mommy's dark room, clad in rags, while the only decent clothes shed were getting dry. Ignore her, Dada said when she was being her silly, tiresome self, but I couldn't. I could feel her anguish, her fears, her despair. They seeped into me drop by drop until I felt myself burdened with them. The day I heard she was sick, I felt relief. It was like hearing of someone's death. Your own life you're living becomes a vital truth you're suddenly conscious of. And so with Cusum's madness, I became aware of my own blessed sanity. Thank God, Cusum, you're nuts, I had thought. Because Urethat, I know I'm balanced, normal, and sane. Suddenly it occurs to me, as long as Cusum was there, I had known clearly who I was. It had been Cusum who had shown me out to be who I was. I was not Cusum. Now, with Cusum dead, we had drunk our tea, had our baths, and then the day rushed at us with all the savagery of a dog unleashed after too long. We looked at each other and found the same question in the other's eyes. What arrow going to do with ourselves? It was not the larger conundrum of what we were to do with our lives that confronted us. It was a simpler puzzle. What are we to do with ourselves this moment, this day, the next moment, the next day? But there was no answer to the question. It seemed to be flung into an abyss. Nothing returned, not even an echo. The stillness, the silencer reminded me of something. It was like sitting in a stationary train. There is movement, bustle, noise all about you. Your train is gathering speed. And you're off then the sudden shocking silence and the gleaming rails outside tell you it was the other train that has left, the other train that moved away. Your own movement has been only an illusion. You are right where you were all along. The truth was that we had both lost the props of our lives. Deprived of his routine, his files, his telephone, his appointments, he seemed to be no one at all. Certainly not that man, my husband, around whose needs and desires my own life revolved. There was nothing he needed. So there was nothing for me to do, nothing I had to do. My own career as a wife was in jeopardy. The woman who had shopped and cooked, cleaned, organized and cared for her home and her family with such passion, where had she gone? We seemed to be left with nothing but our bodies, and after we had dealt with them, we faced blankness. The nothingness of what had seemed a busy and full life was frightening, and yet I had a curious sense of freedom. There was nothing to be cleaned, nothing to be arranged or rearranged, put back in its place tidied. It was free after years of all those monsters that had ruled my life, gadgets that had to be kept in order, the glassware that had to sparkle, the furniture and curios that had to be kept spotless and dust-free, and those clothes, God, all those never-ending piles of clothes that had Tobe washed and ironed, so that they could be worn and washed and ironed once again. Thinking of those 2 rows of mahogany elephants we have in our living room at home in Churchgate was like remembering a vanquished enemy. How much time I had spent dusting and polishing them, how punctilious I had been about it. But it was I who acquired these things, I who hankered after them. No, that's not wholly true. It was Mohan and I, both of us together, who wanted these things. No, even this is not the real truth. The truth is that it was Mohan who had a clear idea of what he wanted, the kind of life he wanted to lead, the kind of home he would live in, and it went along with him. But I cannot blame Mohan, for even if he had asked me, "What do you want?" I would have found it hard to give him a reply. Maitre comes to my mind now, Maitre who so definitely rejected her philosopher husband Yajnavalkya's offer of half his property. "Will this property give me immortality?" she asked him. "No," he said, and she immediately rejected the property. "To know what you want, I have been denied that. Even now I do not know what I want. I only know that the bareness, the ugliness of this place pleased me more than Kerr carefully furnished home in Churchgate. I only know that when we came here, Mohan and I had a queer sense of homecoming. That while Mohan prowled about uneasy and fearful, like a trapped, confined animal, I was adace with myself and my surroundings. I felt as if I had gone back to the days of my early childhood and was back in my Saptagiri Agis room. Agi, a shaven widow, had denuded herself of all those things that make up a woman's life. She had no possessions, absolutely none apart from the 2 saris she wore. Her room was bare, except for the large bed on which my grandfather had slept, a bed which, ever since I knew it, was unburdened by a mattress. There were also 2 chairs in her room, large wooden chairs with arms, the hardness of thair-slatted seats unredeemed by cushions, augmented, in fact, by sharp nails that seemed to sprout from the most unexpected places. As if the carpenter had driven in, generously and at random, nails that sprang out to punish your skin, your clothes, your hair. Aji herself sat on the bare ground and slept on a straw mat at night. The bed was a memorial to grandfather, and the chairs meant for any male who, wearing trousers, could not sit comfortably on the ground. As a child, I had avoided Aji's room, preferring the outside sitting room off her house. I was, perhaps, the only one who used that room, except for Ramukaka, Appa's elder brother, who received an odd visitor there on ceremonial occasions when he had to do his duty as head of the family. At all other times, male visitors had gone straight to Ramukaka's office room, where he saw his few clients, and the women to the inner rooms, the walls of which had gleamed with oil where they rested their sleek, oiled heads. The outside sitting room was like a museum, remaining unchanged through all the years of childhood. The chairs, stiffly arranged along the walls, never moved from their places, the same embroidered covers hanging down their backs, the tall, round table with carved legs plumb in the center. Even the grandfather clock, that had tick-tocked at some time with adolorous melancholy, had given up the struggle by the time I began noticing things, so that it was forever 11:15 in that room. Only the paper flowers in the brass vase on the central table had gradually faded, the colors getting paler, the petals falling off the paper peeling away from the stalk, revealing the wiry skeleton underneath. It was a dead room, but it was there that I sat when I went with Appa on his daily visit to Aji, who lived in the townhouse, reading the paperbacks from the locked cupboard, while Aji, with amadoning persistency, called out to me, "Jaya, where are you? What are you doing there? Jaya, come in here." It was only when Appa had yelled angrily at me that I had gone in, making no secret of my reluctance. And yet, as Mohan and I sat there in an uneasy silence, the vision of Aji's room came to me with a vividness that hurt. It pleased me to link this room to hers, but even nostalgia could not make the memory of Aji a comfortably own. Being with Aji was like sitting on those chairs in her room. There were always nails that came out to pierce and hurt. "I feel sorry for your husband, Jaya, whoever he is," she had said to me once. What for Aji, look at you, for everything a question, for everything a retort. What husband can be comfortable with that? I had neither any questions nor any retorts for Mohan now, and yet there was no comfort. So many subjects were barred that the silences seemed heavy with uneasiness. Nyana's cheerful bustle in the corridor was a relief. I could hear the sound of her sweeping the corridor, the stairs, the landing, the banging of the dustbin lid, her loud, cheerful voice. I opened the door to her with alacrity, and she set about her work with her usual briskness. She carried her unborn child with a marvelous ease, not as if it was a burden. "This time, Benji," she whispered to me. She always whispered when Mohan was around, as if even the sound of our voices would be an affront to the male. "This time it is going to be a boy," she said, passing her hand tenderly over her swollen abdomen. She had had 4 children, 2 girls who lived and 2 boys who died soon after birth. "Just my bad luck, my fate," Nyana had sobbed loudly when she had lost the second, her breasts still oozing milk. This craving for a male child. "Why do you want a boy so much?" I had asked her once. I had heard her cursing men, her husband, her brothers, her father, as wasters, good-for-nothings, drunkards. "Why give birth to a girl, Benji, who'll only suffer because of men all her life? Look at me. My mother loved me very much. She wanted so much for me, a house with electricity and water, shining brass vessels, a silver waist chain, silver anklets, and what have I got? No, Benji, better to have a son." And here she was again, saying confidently, "This time it will be a son." She gave a contemptuous shrug with the pronoun, and I knew it meant her husband. "He says he'll throw me out if I have another daughter." "Just you dare," I said to him. "Let me see your courage. Take yourself another woman if you want, roll in the gutters, I can't prevent you, but just you try to throw me out of this house," I said to him. "How are the girls, Nyana?" I asked her. "All right now, but the eldest girl was very sick, Benji." I thought herstory was over, and did he give me a paisa or help me in any way? I had to pawn my anklets with the Marwari. She showed me her bariankles. "Yes, I'm missing the ch hum of your bells. This silence is not like you at all. Never mind, Banji, I'll get them back when I get my tips for Diwali, she said with a smile. I gave her some tea. She drank it along with some bread she'd tied in her sari end. She put a bun back carefully, saying, "That is for my girls. Have you met Jeej? If you told her I want her, yes, she'll be here in the afternoon," she said. "Leave the work for her," she said. "She'll come and do all of it." So there was nothing at all for me to do once I had made some lunch. We went back to our silence, but I realized I was not free. How could I have imagined I was? His looks, his thoughts followed me about. As he was chatting with Nayana, I could feel him thinking, how can she? Doesn't she know how it is with me? Doesn't she care? And again his voice called out to me. Jaya, Jaya. For some reason, on hearing him call out to me, I suddenly remembered Ramukaka's and Shantakaki's youngest, a hydrocephalic. I thought of him lying on the ground, patiently still, that pathetic, monstrously large head unmoving. His eyes were the only thing in that body that moved in frantic search of his mother, and only Wench came into the room were they at peace. When she sat near him, Heck clutched at her sari, and if she moved away, he whimpered, the ice-making desperate attempts, it seemed, to follow her. But Shantakaki kept away from him as much as possible. She came to him only when Aji, a STEM mother-in-law, shamed her into doing so. She's ashamed of him, her own child, the women whispered. Was she? Suddenly I wondered. And there was Aji herself, sitting in her bare room, calling out Tohersons, her daughters, her grandchildren. When Appa and I went to see her, the moment Appa moved out of her room, she would call out urgently, Vasu, where are you, Vasu, Vasu? When Vasu left this house to make a separate home for himself, Ramukaka had told me after Aji's death. That was the one time, the only time, I saw our mother in tears. I remember the day he cleared out his cupboard. His was in her room. She sat there watching him. She didn't say a word. She didn't make a sound, but the tears just poured out of her. And Vasu walked out without looking at her. I never saw her like that, not even when father died. Yet Appa, her youngest, her best-loved son, left her and went away after he married AI. They blamed AI for it. They called Appa cruel, but I understood why he had to get away. Jaya, Mohan called out to me, Jaya, and I knew I was not free. I could feel the burden of his wanting, the burden of his clinging. It was like going back to that childhood game of keeping house we had played. The Saptagiri cousins and we had arranged the tiny pots and pans Aji had given us as a treat. Put a few grains of rice in one, some dal in another, and, in a third, bits of crudely chopped vegetables that the boy cousins we had been able to coerce or cajole into becoming. Father had bought from the market. This done, we had sat back content, waiting for the meal to be cooked, our world well arranged and in good order, content. Was I content? Yes, curiously enough I was, but Mohan prowled restlessly about the house, unable to stay in one place, unable to sit down for long. I must do something. This waiting is getting me down. Oh well, I suppose it was hard for him. He did not know what waiting was. He had always moved steadily from one moment to the next. But for women, the waiting game starts early in childhood. Wait until you get married. Wait until your husband comes. Wait until you go to your in-laws' home. Wait until you have kids. Yes, ever since I got married, I had nothing but wait. Waiting for Mohan to come home, waiting for the children to be born, for them to start school, waiting for them to come home, waiting for the milk, the servant, the lunch carrier man. And above and beyond this, there had been for me that other waiting. Waiting fearfully for disaster, for a catastrophe. I always had this feeling that if I've escaped it today, it's still there round the corner waiting for me. The locked door, the empty house, the messenger of doom-bringing news of death. With Mohan's confession, I was actually relieved. Here it was at last, my disaster. No more waiting, no more apprehension, no more fears. But Mohan, unlike me, did not believe in disasters. He tried to disown even his own special one, the one he had brought upon himself. No, nothing will happen, nothing can happen. So many men are in this situation. Can anyone live on just a salary? I've panicked for no reason. I'm sure it has blown over. Agarwal did say it would. He should know. He's been in this kind of a thing much longer than I have. He's in much deeper than I am, though he tries to forget that now. Actually, it's only because the minister has changed. In a few days when they meet the minister and explain, I'm sure it'll die down. Agarwal is sure to see that the minister is satisfied. But Agarwal swinded strange when I rang him up yesterday. Maybe I shouldn't have come here. Maybe I should go back. Better Tana, what's happening? What do you think, Jaya? What do you say? I racked my brains trying to think of an answer. And all that occurred to me was Sonia telling Raskolnikov, confess your sins. Kneel down, kiss the earth, and ask for forgiveness. But I thought he might well retort then, kneel down yourself. Have you forgotten it is for you I did this? For you and the children. The children can plead ignorance and get off, but I will have to take on the burden of being a partner in the crime, an ally, an accessory before the fact. Kneel down yourself. Yes, I will have to join him. The pair of us kneeling down and kissing the garbage-strewn, shit-pocked pavement soft Bombay hysteria gurgled in my throat. So what was left? There was the advice Vanita Mommy gave me just before my wedding, blurting it out in a burst of confidence, as if she'd suddenly realized it was her duty to offer her niece some words of wisdom. Perhaps, when she was a bride, someone had done it to her, Dada, and I had wondered whether they'd told her. If your husband has a mistress or two, ignore it. Take up a hobby instead, cats, maybe, or your sister's children. And so she thought she would advise me in her turn. Vanita Mommy advising me had been such a strange thing. It was like Fanny Price being counseled by her Aunt Bertram, that the incident stayed with me through all the years. I could recall not only her words, but even the moment vividly. The crisp November early morning air, the smell of kerosene from the cigarette kept out in the yard, the crackling sounds as the coals ignited, the sparks flying up, thescoring sounds as the servant woman scrubbed the night's vessels with ash and mud, the hissing sound she made from between her teeth as she scrubbed them, and Vanita Mommy herself, with a tray of puja things in her hands. She was returning to the house after her early morning Tulsi puja. Perhaps it was that which made her say what shedded. Remember, Jaya, she had said, a husband is like a sheltering tree. I stood there yawning loudly, thinking of nothing, idly watching Thecat, one of Vanita Mommy's endless procession of cats, blink its eyes in the sun and lick its paws. And the next instant Vanita Mommy, forgetting me, turned to the cat and said, "Mau mau," calling it with silly little chirps. The cat, like all her cats, walked past her, disdain showing in. The curve of its back, the arch of its tail. "Mau mau," she chirruped, following it with her stooping forwards from the hip walk, which conveyed both urgency and gracelessness, but the cat ignored her. I felt a bit like the cat myself. Remember, Jaya, she said to me solemnly. A husband is like a sheltering tree. And it was as if she had said mau mau to me, ignored her. After so many years, the words came back to me. A sheltering tree. Without the tree, you're dangerously unprotected and vulnerable. This followed logically. And so you have to keep the tree alive and flourishing, even if you have to water it with deceit and lies. This too followed, equally logically. But in Saptagiri, we had a creeper that was-watered and manured assiduously, yet it died of too much water off white ants in the manure that destroyed its roots. And so, the truth was that I did not know what to say, how to react. But Hess saw it otherwise. Why don't you say something? You don't seem interested. It seems, Tome, you just don't care. He was wrong. So many things can be lost, abandoned, or misplaced, but the habit of caring is very hard to get rid of. Which was why I listened to him so patiently as he talked. It was like a torrent. I was wrong when I thought he saw Noghosts. They were there for him too, and it was as if he was trying to exorcise them by talking. For if he referred to his present situation, aunts, he went back to his past much more often. He rarely spoke off the future, only very occasionally mentioning a time when we would be, he said, as we were. He spoke to me of his childhood, something had done very rarely in our years together, as if it would have hurt him to admit any link between the man he had become and the deprived child he had been. If ever he had spoken to me of those times, it had been only to emphasize how much, in spite of everything, he had achieved. There, but for the grace of God, go I. I had seen the thought in him whenever he met or spoke of an old school or college friend or acquaintance, or of an earlier colleague Yuho, is only a junior engineer still, just imagine that, Jaya. Or, Poorman, only a lecturer still. But now, here in this place, when he began to speak of the boy he had been, I saw something new in him. A wistfulness, as if he envied that child the innocence of his desires, his clear, unclouded vision off the future. There was something more, too. When he looked back, has seemed to be groping for something, an understanding, perhaps, off he was here in this place, this situation. What's that song the children used to sing when they were little? I think it was some sort of a game, something about a mulberry bush. Here we go round the mulberry bush. Yes, that's the one. And seeing my inquiring gaze fixed on his face, he said lamely, I just thought of that song, I don't know why. Now I can hazard a guess as to the trend of his thoughts. You imagine I were moving, getting on, going ahead, but actually you're just going round and round, coming to the same point over and over again. But if my conjecture is right, to what point in his life was he connecting his situation? Maybe it was not his life, our life together, that he was thinking of, Buthai's parents' life, for it was of them that he spoke most often. Memory escaped out of him, with nothing held back, not even his worst, most humiliating moments, as if they had some purpose to achieve, as if they were helping him to affirm something. He spoke to me of his Spartan boyhood, of walking to school in Thurain, without an umbrella, of the wet mud-spattered clothes he could not change out of because he had no others. He told me of how, month after month, he could not pay his fees, because each time he asked his father for them, he said, "What's the hurry? I'll give it to Yao some time." He spoke of the humiliation of being mocked when he wore the hideously ill-fitting cast-off clothes his mother had got him. He told me of the few crackers he had secreted in his pockets before a Ganapati festival. I kept changing them from pocket to pocket after my bath every day. There was nowhere I could hide them. Butone day I forgot them in the bathroom and Vasant stole them. Smiling, he told me of the merciless pummeling he had given Vasant. My father hadn't come and stopped me. I could have killed Vasant, he said. He spoke of these things without emotion, as if he was speaking often authors, a stranger's hardships. It was only when he spoke of his father that emotion broke through the surface, and over and over. Again, it was of his father that he spoke. It was his father who was the pivot of most of his memories. My father, he called him, strangely, not Anna as he usually did. When I saw his father, he was old and frail, with a face thinned and drawrified into asceticism. He spoke very rarely, he never raised his voice, and to me he was gentle. But the man Mohan spoke of, I was ill. I remember I had fever when he came home that night. It was sleeping on my usual bed, a ragged straw mat. The man looked down at the boy and said, "What are you doing? Do ya want to finish off that mat? Does his lordship think we can buy a new one every day? Leave it alone, will you leave it alone?" And, as the twitching fingers continued, he came closer and kicked at the hand hard so that the boy cried out loudly in anger and pain. The mother rushed out, looked silently at the man, sat down beside the boy and asked at him, "How is your headache? Is it better?" "Stop pampering him," the man said. The mother put her hand on the boy's forehead as if to feel his temperature, but the boy turned away from her, impatient, resentful, humiliated. This is not Mohan's story entirely. In writing it down, I have put over so many things he told me, things he left unsaid. Ash told me this story, things I have imagined myself, and the expression on his face as he spoke to me. I would have left out Thekik. It is hard to reconcile that crude gesture with the man I saw and knew, but I cannot. It loomed so large in his narration. But this other episode, I can do nothing with it. I have to put it down in his words. I wonder if this is because the incident was something forgotten till then, something he hadn't brooded over, so that Ash spoke to me of it. It emerged with all his emotions pristine fresh, his responses clear and simple. Perhaps this is why, even today, I can't see a picture of extraordinary clarity and vividness. The woman crouching in front of the dying fire, sitting blank and motionless, the huddled bundles of sleeping children on the floor, the utter silence, the loud knock at the door. They had all had their food except her. Though she always waited for him, their father, however late he was, and he never gave her any indication of when he would be back. She had asserted herself in this, that she would not make the children wait for him. She gave them their dinner, even the older ones, and then she cooked rice for him again, for he would not, he made it clear to her, eat what he called your children's disgusting leavings. He wanted his rice fresh and hot from a vessel that was untouched. She had just finished this second cooking and was waiting, hoping perhaps that he would not be too late, for it wouldn't do to let the food get cold, and as for lighting the fire again, that was unthinkable. He came in and went straight to the bathroom to wash. By the time Hera returned, she had his plate ready. Hanging his shirt on a peg on Thewall, he sat down, drank a glass of water, poured some into his palm to sprinkle ritually around his plate, and then he paused. "Why is there no fresh chutney today?" he asked, not looking at her. She mumbled something. The next moment he picked up his heavy brass plate and threw it, not at her, but deliberately at the wall, which it hit with a dull clang. He stood up and, jerking his shirt off the peg, walked out of the house. As soon as he had gone, the two older children, the boy and the girl, sat up. "Go back to sleep," the mother said to them. "It's nothing." Silently, watched by the children, she picked up the plate, cleaned the floor and the wall of all the spattered food, and wiped it. Twice the girl pleaded, Ava let me do it. No, the woman replied. You go back to sleep. When it was all done, she came back with a scrubbed plate and said to the boy, Are you awake? Will you go and get me some chilies from next door? The next door woman was getting ready for bed when she opened the door to the boy. She must have just returned from her last before going to bed visit to the bathroom, for her sari was untucked at the back and lay in loose folds at her feet. Was your mother doing the whole day? Chilies at this time off night. Grumbling and mumbling, she gave a handful reluctant Lido the boy. When he went back, his mother was lighting the fire, blowing at it. Through the brass blower to set the flames going. Her eyes were red, but it could have been the smoke, for the wood was always bad. It never burnt clean, and though they had got used to its pungent, acrid smell in the house, her eyes were always red with the smoke. Got them. Put them there and go back to sleep. Her voice was steady. She put some rice on the fire and began grinding the chutney. Again the girl asked her, Shall I do it, Ava? No, you go back to sleep. The baby woke up and began to cry. She hushed it and gave it her breast. When the boy finally drifted off to sleep, she was still sitting there in front of the fire, silent, motionless. If I found the story painful, I found his comment on it strange. God, he said after he told me this, she was tough. Women in those days were tough. He saw strength in the woman sitting silently in front of the fire, but Is saw despair. I saw a despair so great that it would not voice itself. I saw a struggle so bitter that silence was the only weapon. Silence and surrender. I'm a woman and I can understand her better. He's a man and he can't. No, these facile conclusions are not true. Not fair either, because I'm bringing to my understanding of her some facts Mohan does not know. Something I came to know from Vimala, Mohan's sister. Mohan doesn't know this, Vimala had said. I never spoke to him about it. He was a boy. I couldn't talk to him of such things. The conspiracy of women. It binds me too, for I have never told Mohan this story of his mother's either. And it is not as if Vimala swore me to secrecy, and not that it would have mattered if she had, for Vimala is dead too. Strange, isn't it? Vimala had said to me that day. How different I am from my mother. 5 years married now, I performed my 5th Mangalaguri puja this year, and I have no children. While Ava almost all my childhood I remember her as being pregnant. She didn't want that last child. She'd lost 4 or 5 bobbies by then, and she was desperate. I can understand all this now. But then I was only a girl and her behavior that day frightened me. It was only a week or two before she died. She was cooking, she was making the bakeries, and what was I doing? Yes, I was getting ready for school. I had been helping her in the kitchen till then. After Prema got married and went away, it all came upon me. I had to help her. There was too much work. I never had time for studies, but I had to do it, for if it didn't, who else was there? If I complained, Anna would have just said, Don't go to school then, who's asking you to go? He made Prema stay away from school when Sudha was born. I didn't want that to happen. That day I was already late for school and there was no end to Thurk, so I just left it to her. I was collecting my books when sudden lithe thump of her hands as she beat out the bakeries came to a stop. I thought it was the usual pause between 2 bakeries, and I didn't bother until I heard her screams. I didn't even imagine it was her screaming at first. It wasn't like her voice at all. It was a thin, ugly voice that scared me to death. And then, as I watched, she began hitting herself on the face. Her hands were all floury and wet too, and her face soon became white and floury. Soon there were red patches as she went on and on hurting herself. I tried to stop her. I tried to stop her screams. I tried to hold her hands, but I could do nothing. Her hands were like steel. At last her hands slowed down and I could hold them. She began to cry. I tried to make her lie down, I tried to make her drink some water, but she just went on saying, I can't, I can't. She lay near the fire moaning. Her body had become like a stuffed doll. I was alone at home. Prema had taken Sudha away to her house. Manya and Vasant were at school. There was only me and the baby. I thought of calling Manya, but I couldn't leave her and go. I was scared to leave her alone. At last she stopped crying and lay still, breathing heavily. There was ash from the fireplace on her hair and all that flour on her face. Her face was swollen by now. With her eyes caved and she looked like a dead person, her face was the face of a dead woman. A week later, Shedid. She went to a midwife and tried to get herself aborted. Did you know that? Did Manya tell you about it? No. How could you? Manya never speaks of it. He never spoke of Ava. After she died, none of us at home did. People whispered and talked and looked at us oddly. I was ashamed. I knew my mother had done something shameful. Both their photographs have been put up on the walls of Mohan's father's home, where Vasant and Rama now live. I see them each time we go there, the mother and daughter. The mother looks like any author woman of her time, staring blank-faced at the world, the hugicumcum on her forehead blotting out everything in that face but Thebulist woman who died with her husband yet living. But each time I see that picture, I think of flowery hands dealing out a macabre punishment to that face. I can see the red bruises showing through the white clown's mask. And Vimala. Strange how different I am from my mother, she had said to me. Yet I can see something in common between them, something that links the destinies of the two, the silence in which they died. You mean to say, the doctor had asked us incredulously when we had taken Vimala to the hospital. She didn't tell anyone about her illness. When she was suffering so much, she hadn't. All that bleeding, they had whispered after her death, the women in her husband's home. When Mohan and I had visited her, our normal routine visit during our annual stay in Saptagiri, her mother-in-law had shrugged heavily and said, God knows what's wrong with her. She's been lying there on her bed for over a month now. Yes, take her away if you want to. I never heard of women going to hospitals and doctors for such a thing. As if other women don't have heavy periods. What a fuss. But these women who have never had children are like that. It's too late for surgery, the doctor had said. Too late for anything. It had been an ovarian tumor with metastases in the lungs. Why didn't she tell us? Why didn't she write to me? Mohan had cried out, but Vimala never gave us an answer, even to that question. She sank into a coma and died a week later, her silence intact. Part 2, the amiable ghost of our amiable uncle, as Dada had once called Makarand Mama, had begun making his presence felt in his flat on some more. I didn't really mind him. He was harmless. And I couldn't blame him for staging a comeback. After all, he had a greater right to be Hare than I had. The curious, convoluted history of this flat began with him as far as I was concerned. For us, this had always been Makarand Mama's place. Dada himself, even when he had lived here those few months between his finals and his going abroad, had called it that, though by then AI had made it plain that the flat was going to be his. But Dada, for his own devious reasons, had always dissociated himself from this flat. And yet, of her 3 children, it was to Dada that AI had made over this place. I had been resentful and hurt when I had heard this, and yet I should have been prepared. Dada was I's son, the elder of her 2 sons, the eldest of her 3 children. It was natural she should have wanted him to have it. But the sting remained. Perhaps that was why I had been so reluctant to come and live here when we left Lohinagar. Mohan's assumption that we could come and live here whenever we liked had both astonished and angered me. I'm trying to get myself posted to Bombay, Mohan had said. The C thought he'd put me off by warning me we won't get a place to live in Bombay so easily. He was surprised when I told him we have a flat, have we? My question had been genuine, not sarcastic. Why, Jaya, what's the matter with you? There's your dad, our flat. That's not mine, that's I's. Her brother, Makarand Mama, gave it to her, and she's given it to Dada. What have I to do with it? But now it is mine. Dada, the last time he was here, told me he was gifting it to me. This was a secret no one knew, not Mohan, not AI, Notvan Dada's wife Jita. When Dada had spoken to me, I had made affable, hypocritical protest. What will Jita say, oh Jita? Dada had grinned. Can you imagine Jita living here? No, I couldn't. Since her going abroad, Jita had forgotten, or had tried to forget, her middle-class origins, behaving as if her life had always been lived in bacteria-free, prosperous suburbs. She openly despised this part of Bombay, not just its filth and squalor, but thecond of people who lived here. Yet, the thought occurred to me, would she despise the money they could get by selling this flat? And an even more disturbing thought, how would she feel about this gift of her husband? To me, his sister, she had difficulty concealing her hostility to me. She sulked when Dada and I chatted. She had her headaches when Dada and I brought out old family jokes. She looked contemptuous when Dada and I laughed over Kamalakaki's scatological sense of humor. But Jita and her reactions were Dada's problem. And as he had told me, this flat is ours. I mean, it belongs to our family. It's part of our family history, as Ramu Kaka would say. Our link via Makarand Mamato, Bombay talkies, Devika Rani and all that, Jaya? Sounds impressive, does it? Well, now it will be yours. I don't suppose I'll ever come back here to Bombay, to live, I mean. And I'd much rather you have it than Ravi. So it was mine. But it could so easily not have been mine. Vanita Mami, after Makarand Mama's death, had insisted that Makarand Mama had meant her, his brother's wife, to have this flat and not AI, his sister. He had said so to her, she claimed, before he went away to the sanatorium at Panchagani to die. And most unusually for her, Vanita Mommy had, according to AI, stuck to her story with a dogged tenacity, refusing to be cowed down even by her mother-in-law's, my other Aji's, jibes. Vanita Mommy had clung to her story. I was the only one who was good to the poor boy. That is why he told me, sister-in-law, I want to give you the only thing I have in this world. This, of course, was I's version of the story. Personally, I could never imagine Vanita Mommy talking in this dramatic, assertive manner. But perhaps there was a grain of truth in I's exaggerated story, for A herself had taken Vanita Mommy's claim very seriously. She had never failed to attack it with great energy. Good to Makarand? Why, he never even spoke to her. He left home just a few months after she and Shandu got married. Your Aji threw him out and he stayed with your Appa and me in Saptagiri. What does Vanita know of him? Poor Makarand. Alienated from his family, when alive, reviled and abused by them for what he had done. It's a pity he never knew how. Much they all admired him and sympathized with him behind that facade of hostility. For that's how they all made it out to be later, after Theman's death. Except other Aji, one had to give her credit for her steadfastness. Even after her son's death, she never spoke of him, except with anger and contempt. There must they've been a narcissistic streak in Makarand Mama, in spite of hissin prepossessing looks. When we had first come here, Dada, AI and I to take possession of this place, we had been astounded to see how many photographs he had hung up on the walls, large photographs with heavy black frames, like the black lines enclosing an obituary in a newspaper. He had been all over the flat, in different roles, though none of his disguises could hide his weak chin, his vulnerable, unsure eyes. And yet Makarand Mama had had the courage to defy his family, even his terrible mother, my other Aji, and become that disgraceful thing, an actor. What damned him irrevocably was the fact that he joined a professional troupe, intending to earn his living on the stage. And later he compounded this offense by going to Bombay and getting in Tamavis. He never really got beyond the small bit roles, but for the family it was enough. He had become part of the bad world of films, and his very name was never to be mentioned in the family. It wasn't Appa, and it was Shanju Mama who told me this in the desolate days after Appa's death, who had helped Makarand Mama stealthily and fitfully. Hence, I suppose, the legacy to AI. Actually, they had all believed that he had died a pauper. Shanju Mama had taken his brother's references to, my Bombay flat as the delusions of a dying man. Only after his death had Shanju Mama realized it was true. Makarand Mama had bought this flat dirt cheap from a Muslim actor, who had bought it for his Hindu mistress, in a hurry to get to Pakistan before partition. And according to AI, only after all this had been revealed had Vanita Mommy discovered a special affinity between herself and her husband's brother. I can still hear I's prodigiously loud sniff as she said this. Family feuds. For years, Vanita Mommy had refused to give up her claims of ownership. Which was, perhaps, one of the reasons why AI had hustled Dada into moving into it immediately after his finals. Dada had occupied it only half-heartedly, staying on in his hostel most of the time, using this flat, with some of his friends, more as a weekend refuge. Before he left for the States, he had cleared this place with a finality that had chilled me, making it clear that he had no intention of returning. And then Mohan and I came here from Lohinagar. Only temporarily, Mohan had said, until I can find something better. He had found it, the something better, in the government-allotted flat in Churchgate. Yet here we were back again with Makarand Mama. Sometimes I wondered whether there was any grain of truth in Vanita Mommy's assertion that this had been left to her. She had given up so much, so easily. Why was she so ridiculously obdurate about this? It had also occurred to me once that if this had, in fact, been hers, she would have given it to Kusum. The bizarre thought came home a few days after I had installed Kusum here, while I waited for her daughter Lotta to open the door to me. I had been smiling at the thought when Kusum herself opened the door. And Kusum, not knowing why I was smiling, had smiled too, a smile so false, so sycophantic, that I had immediately begun snapping at her. Why poor, childless Vanita Mommy had taken to the feeble, spiritless Kusum of all her sisters' brood is a mystery. Perhaps Vanita Mommy had felt a kindred spirit in Kusum, both of them born failures, born losers. I could see no other reason for her poor choice. For any of Kusum brothers or sisters would have been better. There was Shayla, Kusum's younger sister, wily, sharp-as-a-needle Shayla, who had taken infinite pains to insinuate herself into Vanitamami's graces. But Vanitamami had been invariably sharp and short with her. Perhaps the truth was that Vanitamami had never known what it was to choose. Since the day she got married, she, like the rest of Ace family, was dominated and ruled by that ghoul, her mother-in-law, Mayather Aji. Even Vanitamami's saris were chosen for her by the old woman. Later, there was Ai, who went back to her old home after Appa's death. There still is Ai. But one fact was inescapable. The two weak females, Vanitamami and Kusum, had managed to have their way. In spite of Shanjumama and other Raji, Kusum became a part of the family, part of our lives, too, when we went to live in Ambagayon after Appa died. A hard-won victory. I can remember how, for years, we had only to call out, "Run." Kusum, Shanjumama's coming for Kusum to disappear, swiftly and silently. For long, even after Shanjumama seemed to have accepted Kusum's presence in the house, she had been there on sufferance. In time she was, no, not accepted, but ignored. But she could never besir. The cry off-run, Kusum, Shanjumama's coming, had been an auto make her fly in terror. Oh well, there is always the terrible tenacity of the weak. Makarand Mama, too, how successfully he evaded being dislodged from here. Dada had been the first to make an attempt and fail. "I have a great idea," he had said gleefully the day we came here and found these photographs of his. "Why don't we send these to Vanitamami after all? She was the only one who was good to him, wasn't she?" I's laughter, gay and girlish, even after she was made desolate by widowhood, had joined ours. But the moment Dada and I had begun taking the photographs off the walls, she had said sharply, "Dinu, what are you doing? Why do you want to remove those?" "Let them be. Let them. You mean we should let these stay here, why not? What harm will those photographs do you? And don't forget, it's because of your uncle that you have this place." The beatification of Makarand Mama had already begun. He, who had been the scorned, the despised failure, had become that familiar cliché, the tragic genius who died young, unrecognized by a stupid, cruel world. But I knew I had faith in him, Ai says solemnly. It was I really prodded your Appa into helping him. Ai believes in her lies. I have often watched in fascination the leaps and bounds of her mind, as, starting from the banks of uncomfortable facts, she reaches the safety of easier to live with invention. Leave those photographs as they are. They are? Dada had looked hesitantly at them and then smiled. Why not? Let him be. The amiable ghost of our amiable uncle can peacefully continue to haunt us. It had been Mohan who had finally got rid of Makarand Mama. He had taken the photographs off the walls without any qualms when we had moved in from Lohinagar and piled them in the outside gallery, saying you can take them with you the next time you go to Ambagayon. Mohan had also neatly and skillfully scraped all the beauties Dada and his friends had gummed on the walls, using a blade and warm water for the edges. He had done it all with the thoroughness that had reminded me of an army taking possession of invaded territory. With photographs gone, the bare clean walls underneath had glared at us accusingly. We had to use 3 coats of paint before they were obscured. And then, curiously, a day or two after Mohan and I came here, I noticed those ghostly rectangles appearing gagging through all the coats of paint we had slapped on the walls. As if Makarand Mama was gently, unobtrusively, coming back to his old home. It strengthened my illusion that we had never moved away from here, never gone to that so much desired flat in Churchgate. There was the sweeper woman taking out the garbage. There was Jija swabbing Theflor. I could hear the Kelkar's front door bang loudly as Sadish ran out. Soon Ratty would be home from her nursery school, and in a while Rahul's school bus would deposit him on the pavement outside the building. And I would begin to agonize over the question, what shall I make for tea today? But I could not sustain for long even the illusion that things were as they had been. Things can never be as they were. It's astonishing how we comment on change, as if change is something remarkable. On the contrary, not to change is unnatural against nature. Biology recognizes this fact. It is stasis that is the aberration. And here, Event's facade of sameness crumbled at a touch. That was Nilima, not Sadish, banging the Kelkar store. It was Nayana, not her mother-in-law, Sona, carrying out the garbage. And if it was still Jija swabbing the floor, it was a changed Jija minus all the symbols of her wifehood, her kumkum, her green bangles, her black beads. As for Rahul and Ratty, Their absence was loud and obvious. E wondered if their going had been part of Mohan's preparation for this eventuality. But no, that was not possible. Knowing Mohan as I did, it was unthinkable. And anyway, the initiative had been Rupa's. It was who had suggested that the children join them on their trip to the south. "It'll be more enjoyable for the children if we have some company," she had said. "Anita always says, just us is very boring." Perhaps the invitation had been part of the charade of great friendship we played out so enthusiastically. We met as families once a week. Rupa and I rang each other up twice a week. We went shopping together. We saw movies together. We were members of the same women's club. And yet the truth was that Rupa and I were strangers. We never talked head to each other, not like Seema and I had done in school. Seema and I had told each other everything, whereas Rupa and I skated, hastily and fearfully, over the thin ice of our daily routine life. We didn't probe deeper. We didn't even want to. I hadn't known until recently that Rupa was the granddaughter of the famous singer, Rajini Sursikar. I had been greatly excited by the discovery. Appa had been a great admirer of the old ladies. But Rupa, when I had spoken to her of it, had met me with a coolness and indifference that had been a distinct rebuff, and I had left it at hat. Nevertheless, we kept up this fiction of our friendship with great enthusiasm. "Rupa," I would cry over the phone, "what happened to you? Haven't heard from you in days." And knowing that I didn't really care about what had happened, I listened, as if with breathless anxiety, to Rupa telling me some trivialities of her life. Mohan and Ratty joined in this let's pretend game of ours. Rahul alone refused to contribute his bit to this piece of family fiction. He wasn't comfortable when the two families came together, as if there was something about our relationship with them that made him uneasy. He hadn't wanted to go with Rupa and a shock on this trip. To Mohan, this had been sacrilege. I had seen Mohan's happiness in breathing in the aura around Rupa and a shock. A shock was all that Mohan would have liked to have been. A shock's father belonged to the aristocracy of the British-era Indian civil service. A shock, carrying on the tradition of being a civil servant, seemed to have inherited from his father all the assurance and arrogance of the ICS. The family was so impeccably proper, it wasn't surprising they wanted no mention of Rajini Sursikar, that eccentric, disreputable genius in their house. For Rahul to refuse to join such a family had been something Mohan could not understand. It had enraged him even more when Rahul had been unable to give an answer to his repeated wheeze. "It's boring," Rahul had said finally, lamely. "Boring. I'm tired of hearing the word. Everything in the world is boring." "Is there anything that interests you?" Anything at all. When Rahul had been a kid, it had been comics. He had hoarded them jealously, refusing to lend them to anyone. Mohan had hated them, trash he had fumed. A sheer waste of time. No wonder he doesn't do well in his studies. When Ratty had taken up comics too, Mohan had relented. But by then Rahul had lost interest. For him, it had been cricket for a while, then music. Both had gone the same way as his comics. The last few months there had been silence in his room. It had frightened me. "Rahul," I would cry out before entering. "What are you doing?" "Nothing, Mummy," and he was, in fact, doing nothing. The walls of his room were bare, his transistor was silent, his table had a few neatly piled textbooks and notebooks on it, books which were rarely opened. "Don't nag," he said angrily when I reminded him he was wasting his time. When Mohan was around, he opened his books, but I knew he was just staring at him blankly. When he had brought home his report card at the end of last year, Mohan had lost his temper. I begged. I borrowed money for school and college. I studed whenever I could get a few minutes, wherever I could find a bit off space, and I never got anything less than a first class. And this boy, he has everything he wants. We deny him nothing, and look at his marks. I'm ashamed that my son should do so badly. It had made me uneasy that Rahul had listened silently, denying nothing, not excusing himself. It had been Mohan who had finally put his anger behind him and turned practical. "This is going to be your final year in school. We've got to do something." It had been this something that had catapulted Rahul from silencing to open revolt. "Tuitions," Rahul had asked when Mohan had told him what we had arranged for him. "I don't want to have tuitions. Without that, you don't stand a chance. You won't even be able to get into a good college. And with these tuitions, I won't improve either. I'll just get better marks in school because you're paying the master so much extra money. Where does he get his cynicism from?" I had thought. And then fearfully, is it I who have taught him to believe in nothing? But Rahul had not been able to withstand Mohan's fury and determination for long. "Okay," He had shrugged with the exaggerate cynicism of the young. If you want to buy marks for me, go ahead. What do I care? Rupa's invitation had promised us a respite from the tension of this struggle, but Rahul had not wanted to go on the trip either. What do you want? Mohan had asked him. Is there anything at all that you want? It seemed that Rahul never had any answers to our questions. Or perhaps the truth was that Rahul himself did not know what he wanted. I thought then of Rahul as a child, anxiously running from person to person after seeing a street brawl between two political parties. Daddy, what are we, Daddy? Are we the red flag or are we Shiv Sena? Mummy, what arrow, Mummy? Tell me, what are we? Jabai, what are you? Jabai, what am? I finally, irritated by his nagging persistence, I had replied. We are nothing. Had Rahul taken my word for it and made himself nothing? Was that he had no answers for us anymore? And what had I done? Go on, Rahul, I'd said. I'm sure you'll enjoy the trip, pouring oil over troubled waters, being the peacemaker in the family, the bridge between father and son. Whatever it was I'd tried to do, I had failed at it. Finally, Rahul had given in. Okay, I'll go. If I stay here, I'll have you nagging at me all day. I might as well go. So the stage was set for our drama in this flat, the two of us by ourselves, waiting for God knows what. Strangely, we had never spoken of the children. Not since the day he had told me about Thanquery against him. What about the children? I had asked. They must not know, they must be told nothing. By the time they return, I'm sure we'll be back home, as we were, the four of us. But there was this intervening period to be gone through before we could go back to being as we were. It was Appa who had told us about village women who, if surprised in their early morning squatting behind a bush or a tree, quickly whisked their saris over their faces. Never mind if their bottoms are exposed, Appa had laughed. As long as the intruder doesn't know whose bottom it is, they feel safe. Mohan and I had been like those women. But it didn't work. How could we have hoped to get away with being unnoticed? Even Nayana was curious. Where are the children, Bainji? She asked me the first day. I gave her some explanation, but she never ceased to cluck Herdung sympathetically over our separation. Her inquisitiveness about our prolonged stay irritated me. Jija's silence was, in contrast, most restful. Actually, I had distrusted her silence at first. I had mistaken it for surliness, for hostility, for a reluctance to work. Now I knew her better. This silent, almost dour woman had never let me down since Sesh had come to work for me. She had worked for me until we left this place. She still came whenever I needed her. Loyalty had nothing to do with it. Jija was basically a realist. She badly needed the money she earned. She knew her value as a good worker. She knew it was her reputation for reliability enabled her to earn more than the other servants did. She was that rare thing among them, a pure professional, and proud of it. I envied her single-mindedness. She knew what her purpose in life was. It was to go on living. Enduring was part of it, and so she endured all that she had to. Don't ever give my husband any of my pay. She had warned Muhan she had started working for me, giving me a hint of what her life was like. There had been days when she had come to work bruised and hurt, rare days when she had not come at all. But I had never heard her complain. What had surprised me then, what still surprised me, was that there seemed to be no anger behind her silence. With whom shall I be angry? She had asked me when I had once tried to probe her feelings. My parents didn't intend marrying me to a drunkard. He was not a drunkard then. He had a job, a good mill job, and well lived in a decent room in a chawl, not in the slums. He lost all this during a strike. That was not his fault. Others misled him. He believed whatever his friends told him. He started drinking after that. God didn't give us any children. That was his misfortune as well as mine. How could I blame him for marrying again when I couldn't give him any children? How could I blame that woman for marrying him? With whom shall I be angry? With whom, indeed? Poor Jija, we said, all of us women who employed her. But I knew, if I thought of it, that I wouldn't have had her life any different. All those happy women with husbands in good jobs, men who didn't drink and beat their wives, those fortunate women whose kitchen shelves gleamed with brass and stainless steel vessels, they were of no use to me. It was Jija and her like I needed. It was these women who saved me from the hell of drudgery. Any little freedom I had depended on them. And I was wrong when I thought that Jija's life had changed because her husband was dead and she had cast off those auspicious symbols of her wifehood. The son had stepped into his father's shoes. The son of that woman Jija's husband had married because Jija had been unable to give him a son. The woman who, lacking Gija's toughness and resilience, had died of TB a year after her son was born, leaving Gija to bring up her 2 children. This son, Rajaram, now drank and beat up his wife, Tara, so that Tara and her 3 children had become Gija's responsibility. I remembered Tara as a bride, a plump, round-faced girl, awed by her mother-in-law, fascinated and frightened by Bombay. At first, she had only occasionally accompanied Gija on her rounds. After 3 years and 2 bobbies, she had begun trailing the older woman from house to house, her face skeletally hollow, her clavicles more prominent than her breasts, at which her baby suckled with a kind of desperation. Tara had none of Gija's reticence or stoicism. She cursed and reviled her husband and, sobbing loudly, moaned her fate. "So many drunkards die," she cried, "but this one won't. He'll torture us all to death instead." Gija sternly shut her up. "Stop that! Don't forget he keeps the kumkum on your forehead. What is a woman without that?" Tara's eldest, Manda, a scrawny mite in the ubiquitous white blouse and blue skirt, the skirt held up by a string round her waist, followed Gija about now. She went to school in the morning, collected money for the milk in the afternoon, delivered the milk, stood in the queue for the rations for kerosene, and helped Gija on her holidays, briskly scrubbing vessels in a parody of her grandmother's actions. "Where is your mother?" I asked Manda as she settled down in our gallery with a magazine in her hands, waiting for Gija to complete her work. "At home. She looks after our Badadawada business now." It was Gija, Nayana had told me, who had started Tara on this business. It was Gija who went to Baikala Market once a week to buy the potatoes, the onions, the garlic, and chilies. It was Manda who got the kerosene, Manda who with her 2 younger brothers sat and peeled the boiled potatoes, the onions, the flakes of garlic, Manda who ran about, served the customers. "But now, because of this mill strike," Manda went on with her worldly wise air, "there are no customers and there is no work for her. Nobody has money for Badadawadas. Baba beats up AI because she has no money to give him, and if she gives him any money, Aji scolds her," she said matter-of-factly. Where was it I had read an account of how baby girls were done to death a century or so back? They were, I had read in horror, buried alive, crushed to death in the room they were born in. And immediately after that, a fire was lit on the spot, to purify the place, they said. Perhaps it was to ensure death. All those agonies, for days I had been unable to get it out of my mind. But now I wondered whether it wasn't more merciful, that swift ending of the agony once and for all, than this prolonging of it for years and years. Bombay, when I first came to it, had been a shock after the piquant contrasts of Saptagiri. In Saptagiri, the central part of the town where Aji and the Kakas lived, with its whitewashed houses, tall rounded walls, and back alleys where open, smelly gutters ran, had been a world apart from our house on the fringe of the town. Our house had been surrounded by fruit orchards, and the clean little ribbon of a tarred road leading to it had been bordered by tamarind trees and gutters in which nothing ever ran but rain water. But Bombay, I'd realized at once, was nothing but a gray, uniform ugliness. The buildings had seemed terrible to me, endless rows of looking exactly alike, ramshackle, drab buildings, the washing that flapped on their balconies giving them a sluttishly gay look. It had taken me some time to notice the streets of Bombay. Once I did, however, I had been immediately caught up by the magic of their teeming life. I had watched in utter fascination the mobs, the brawls, the drunkards, the school children, the coy newlyweds, and processions. I'd watched so many of them at different times on different occasions. But now, standing on the balcony, the sun-warmed wooden railing under my hands, as I watched the men march past with flags and banners, men hemmed in by baton-swinging policemen, I felt somehow that this procession was different. Was it because these men marched in silence, with neither slogans nor angry, violent gestures? The anger, though, was unmistakably there, making its presence felt through the semblance of orderly protest. Or was it because, for the first time, I did not have the comfortable detachment of a spectator? I felt threatened, and not by the men, nor by the violence I could feel simmering in them. I had a queer sensation, as if something was breaking up, a design or a pattern I was familiar with. Without it, I would have to face the unknown, all of us standing on our balconies, at our windows, watched the men in silence. The traffic had been halted to let them go past, and there were no sounds but the shuffling of feet, the harsher ringing of the policemen's hobnailed boots, the occasional tap of a lathi against the ground. There was something about these men to me. They seemed as enigmatic as the words I'd been seeing splashed in white paint on walls and bus shelters. Huge words screaming out total revolution. A nauseating whiff of human excreta came to me from the road bordering the slums. Holding my hand to my nose, I turned round sharply and saw Mohan near me, a magazine he had been reading dangling from his fingers. "I was just coming in," I said guiltily, apologetic, but Mohan seemed unaware of me. He was watching the procession recede, a strange expression on his face. Traffic began to move and sounds flowed back into the vacuum of silence, but still Mohan stood watching the road. And I thought of how once, when I had stumbled blindly into the house, eyes streaming, as the police had burst tear gas shells among two brawling mobs, Mohan had asked me in asperity, "Don't you know it's better to come in and close the doors and windows at such a time? This time it was tear gas, next time it could be real bullets. Whenever you see crowds, or even a procession, just come in with the children and close the doors. That's always safer." A crow cawing harshly near us broke the spell. We went back into the house, Mohan to his cursory magazine reading and I to my chores. We did not speak of what we had seen. In fact, we had stopped speaking, except for the essentials of daily living. The fact of what he had done, of what lay before us, came between us, an awkward, silent third, making comfortable conversation impossible. That night, as we lay on the extreme edges of our bed, I knew he was awake too, but there was nothing I could say to him and... So I lay in silence, listening to the harsh whirring of the fan above us. The vague disquietude of the afternoon returned, and I knew what was. Part of it, the tramp of the mill workers' feet as they went to work. As they came back from it, these sounds had been missing since. We came here, Mohan and I in Saptagiri. Our house had stood well back from a little-used road, so that even the rare sounds, the creak jingle of a cart, the ping of a cycle bell, the cry of a watchman from an adjoining fruit orchard had come to us muted by the distance. If the days were quiet, mornings and evenings had been noisy, threaded through with bird sounds. Sometimes, even at night, there had been a confused cry of a bird, a cry that, for some reason, had terrified AI. A woman full of portents and omens, she always claimed that it was this unnatural sound that had given her a premonition of Appa's death. "I knew something terrible was going to happen," she often said triumphantly, her grief forgotten, overlaid after all the years by her pleasure in her own prescience. It had taken me long to get used to the diverse sounds of Bombay, to what had seemed to me an endless assault on the ears. The first night I slept here, I had woken up in fright on hearing the sounds of the mill workers' tramping feet. I had rushed to Dada. Dada, something happened. Listened to all those people going somewhere. What? He had looked up irritably from his books, listened for a moment, and then smiled. "Oh, that, I wondered what you meant. That's only the mill workers going to work. It goes on all the 24 hours of the day." Almost worse to me than this constant noise had been the sense of being invaded, not just by sounds, but by a multitude of people and their emotions as well. Anger, fear, hatred, envy, tenderness, love, all of these came to me as I lay in bed, a fascinated listener. Sometimes at night, when there was a diminuendo in all sounds, I had heard even the tinkle of a woman's bangle distinctly, and lovers' whispers. I had taken it all in eagerly, though often there was the shamed, guilty sensation of being a voyeur. Now, once again, as we lay in silence, Mohan and I, whispers drifted to me through the window. I could imagine the couple, standing against the wall, cowering into the darkness, clinging to each other. But as the man's voice rose above an inaudible murmur, I began to realize that the man was not talking of love. Or was he? "Talk," he was saying. "Where did you go today? Tell me." "Open your mouth. Why don't you open your mouth, you bloody whore? Open your mouth and speak the truth. Where did you go today? Can't you reply? Has someone cut out your tongue? Tell me quick or I'll give it to you. Talk, fast, say something." The sound of a blow, soft moans. "Open your mouth, you bitch. Tell me where you went. Speak." Another blow, and surely a kick, moans again. But never any reply to the question, just the soft moans at first. Once an involuntary cry softened into a wail. "Mother, mother, mother. Your mother is another whore like you. Tell me where you went. Damn you, speak before I smash all your bones." Again the blows, and still the woman clinging desperately to her silence, abandoning it only to cry softly, "Mother, mother, mother." It went on until a voice shouted out, "What's going on there? What do you mean by disturbing people like this? Go away and let us sleep. Get out of here." Silence. Had the couple moved away together? Thank God, Mohan said, startling me. I had thought him asleep. I thought I would go down and strangle that man. The anger in his voice astonished me. I had never imagined that he would be listening. I had always thought him a man devoid of curiosity. Often I had envied him for his indifference to others. Surely, I had thought, it shows his superiority, the fact that he is above the kind of petty curiosity that devours me. But maybe, the thought came to me now, he has been unable to hear anything, his ears filled with the triumphant sound of his own march onwards. Jaya, we're going to Bombay. Jaya, I'm promoted. Jaya, I'm being deputed. Jaya, I'm being sent abroad. They enrage me, these irresponsible, callous men, Mohan went on. I had a queer feeling that Mohan was talking, not of the man on the road below, but of his father. He was thinking, not of the woman who had moaned, "Mother, mother," but of his own mother, that woman sitting huddled over the fire at night. Jaya! His hand suddenly closed the distance between us, and my heart gave an involuntary jump. I had to force myself to let my hand remain where it was, not to snatch it away from under his. Panic flowed into me from his convulsive grip. Jaya, I have never been that, have I? What? Irresponsible? Of course not. As if he had not heard my feebly reassuring murmur, he burst out, "It's not fair. It's easy for those men to go out on the streets, to threaten, to become violent." Surprised, I realized he was now speaking of the men we had watched go past in the procession in the afternoon. And they get what they ask for. What about people like us? Gently, I moved my hand away from under his as he went on. I remember the day I got my first job in Lohinagar. I felt such relief. I was free. I didn't have to ask anyone for money anymore. And Lohinagar, it was to work there, to get a job in that steel plant was, he fumbled for the right words. But I knew what he meant. To work in Lohinagar had meant opportunity and hope and doors opening to a new kind of life, for the country, for him, for all those who worked there. Looking back to one's early days is, I suppose, like looking down a kaleidoscope and seeing a jumble of colors, the rainbow, trapped at the end of it. And even I, to whom Lohinagar was drab houses, dusty roads, pregnancy, a baby's wails, and sleeplessness, I knew what it meant to Mohan and his kind, all those engineers, to work in that largest steel plant. Looking back through his eyes, even to me those days seemed tinged with freshness, fortified by a sense of purpose. How we slogged in those days! I worked like a dog, 10, 12 hours a day. Remember, Jaya, how exhausted I was when I came home. And irritable when Rahul, never a contented, placid baby, woke up and cried. So that I had carried Rahul into the kitchen when he woke up at night and sat there, shutting the door behind me. They came back to me now, those hungry, whimpering cries resounding in that small room with a hollow, dismal sound. I remembered how, with a frantic impatience, I had pumped up the primus, watching the water come, oh so slowly, to a boil. And Rahul, tired out with his crying, sucking at his fingers with loud, resounding sucks that had filled me with guilt. I didn't mind the work. I never minded any amount of work. But what went wrong, Jaya? What happened to us? Trying to think of an answer, I could only see the girls in the hostel, all of us, standing on our balconies and watching the road-lining crowds wave flags and cheer the two men who folded their hands in a greeting and smiled blandly back. I heard the cries of Hindi Chinny bye-bye, but almost immediately came the war. We had been stabbed by our brother. Yes, that betrayal had been the watershed between hope and cynicism, between dreams and disillusionment. Things would never be the same again. But finely tuned as I was to Mohan's thinking, I knew he was not talking or thinking of these things, but of himself. It was the strike, I said aloud. What strike? The strike in your plant in Lohinagar. You know how you and that man, what was his name? Swami something. Swaminathan. Yes, both of you got into trouble because you took action against a worker. There was an inquiry. You said you didn't want to stay there after that. You said you lost interest in your work. Oh, that thing. But that was not why I decided to quit. I'd made up my mind much earlier, long before that. But I remember you're telling me it was because of the stand they took then that. I had an angry sense of being cheated. No, that didn't make much difference to me. Any fool knows it's no use getting tangled up with the unions. I decided to leave long before. You remember the time when my father asked us for some extra money? Was it for Vasant? Or Sudha? I don't remember. Anyway, he asked for it, and you were to go Ambigayon with Rahul, and we were so short of money for everything. It's not fair, not fair, I remembered Mohan crying out. When I got a job, I thought my problems were over, but my God, look at us now. It was as if at that moment Mohan had realized that he had moved, after years of struggle, only from not having enough money for clothes, fees, and books, to not having enough for a gas connection, for traveling in comfort, for his brother's clothes, his sister's fees. Simple living and high thinking, the words of the Gandhian era, the words I had heard so often as a child. Ramu-Kaka's favorite axiom, repeated ad nauseum to any of his family who asked for something. It's not how you look, what you have or what you wear that's important. Look at Gandhi. None of his children had dared retort, though they had grumbled privately. But we're not Gandhi. Now I could top Ramu-Kaka's example of Gandhi with my own story. It was when I was in my second pregnancy and suddenly started bleeding. Leaving Rahul, then just a year with a neighbor, I had gone to the hospital as I was in my crumpled, soiled homeware sari. Is the patient ready? The doctor had asked the nurse, and then, briskly coming to my side, began asking me questions in his convent-accented Hindi. When had the bleeding begun? How many months since my last period? He had asked the questions in the simplest terms, struggling to find the right words, simple enough to be understood by the kind of woman he had judged me to be from my appearance. It's 7 weeks now since my last period, I had answered in English, not deliberately using the language but doing it automatically. The bleeding began this morning. I've had no problems till now. Suddenly his face had changed. He had looked young, foolish, at a terrible disadvantage. His air of superiority had oozed out, leaving him foolishly drooping. At that moment, the chief medical officer had come to me and said, "Mrs. Kulkarni, your husband just rang up, and the CEO good, you've met our new doctor. Sinha, have you examined her?" "I'm sorry," the young man had tried to apologize later. "What for?" I'd asked, feigning ignorance. But both of us had known what for. It was because he had misjudged me from my appearance. I had told Mohan this story when I went home. I had thought he would laugh as I had done, but he had been furious. "Buy yourself a couple of good saris," he had said. "Don't wear those shabby things even at home. And why don't you make yourself a nice housecoat, like the one the MD's daughter wears? I've seen her in the garden with it. It looks very nice." Like the MD's daughter. My God, do you know how much that would cost? She can afford it on her daddy's pay, I certainly caw. Was it then that Mohan had cried out, "It's not fair"? And perhaps looking back now, trying to connect things, was it soon after this that he had come to me saying, "I'm trying to get out of here. There's a post in Bombay, non-technical, purchases. How can you get that?" "I'm trying, I hope I'll get it. The CE promises he'll help. I've done so much for him, he can't refuse me." Mohan had managed to get the job. I never asked him how he did it. If Gandhari, who bandaged her eyes to become blind like her husband, could be called an ideal wife, I was an ideal wife too. I bandaged my eyes tightly. I didn't want to know anything. It was enough for me that we moved to Bombay, that we could send Rahul and Ratty to good schools, that I could have the things we needed, decent clothes, a fridge, a gas connection, traveling first class. And there was enough for Mohan to send home to his father, for Sudha's fees, Vasant's clothes, and Sudha's marriage. "Your life," Yajnavalkya told Maitre, "will be like the life of anyone who owns property." Well, what more does one want? Immortality. What a crazy idea. It was Nilima who breached the wall of isolation we had built around ourselves. She rang the bell in her usual impatient, irritating tattoo, and I knew immediately who it was. "Hi, Auntie," she greeted me. "Ma wants to know if you need any vegetables." The vegetable seller squatting at their door looked up at me hopefully as she adjusted the cloth pad on her head, and I said, "No, I don't want any vegetables." Ma was Mukta, the perfect neighbor who would, if you were not at home, not only take in your milk but set your curds for you as well. Mukta came back to pay the woman, and Nilima quickly insinuated herself into our flat, saying, "I can come in, can't I, Auntie? I saw Uncle going out." Mukta and I smiled at each other. "Coming, Mukta." I held the door open for her. "Or off to work." She shook her head. "Not yet, I'm going at 1, but I have to finish the cooking. Don't let Neela disturb you." But Nilima's very presence was disturbing. She'd always been a blatant disturbing factor, a fatherless child since birth, a dark baby, a crow in a family of fair-skinned swans. "How can the child be so dark?" her grandmother often muttered. "None of our people are dark." "What do you mean, how, my? This is how. Look at me." And Nilima planted herself sturdily in front of her fair-complexioned, grossly fat grandmother. She strutted. Yes, literally, I'd seen her doing just that, flaunting her difference from the rest of them. Whenever Mai or Nalu Auntie or any of them talk of someone, they either say she is as fair as milk or as dark as a crow, Nilima had told me once, mimicking an indeterminate female voice with vicious malice. They call me a crow too, she had said scornfully. Just because I'm dark, who cares? I like crows anyway. They're so sharp, aren't they, Auntie? I don't know, I'd said frankly. I can't bear them myself, the way they look at you as if they can see right through you. How is it you're at home today, Nilima? I asked her now. Saturday, Auntie. She looked at me in surprise. And thank God for that, we had 3 tests this week. I'm ex-house-dead. She dragged out the word and threw herself dramatically into a chair. I was just waiting for Saturday, not that. She glowered at the thought. It's any fun sitting here at home with Mai. I'm going out in the evening, whatever Mummy says. Getting away from Mai, that was the favorite sport in that house. I'd seen all of them doing it. And a bat too, Nilima had once told me, chuckling over this story of her grandfather. Do you know, Sadish uncle told me this, a bat actually pays his office to keep him on there so that he can get away from Mai. Nilima, who was gaunt and at the moment graceless, was sitting awkwardly in the chair, one leg drawn up under her, giving me glimpses of her underwear. I could see the stains on it and it made me uncomfortable. But Nilima, I knew, was not ashamed of her monthly curse. For her, it was only a hated enemy. It's so horrible, Auntie, she had cried out to me once. I don't want it, why can't I stop having it? Isn't there any drug I can take to stop it? I had laughed at her then, but now I wonder whether I should have told her about my failure. I could have told her about my excitement when I had started on the pill and taken in its possibilities. I'm a free woman now, I had thought. I've assumed control over my own body, over its clumsy, cumbersome processes. Now I will conceive only when I want to. I can even stop menstruating if I want. It was my girlhood dream come true. But instead, my body had seemed to go berserk at my attempt to control it. It had simulated pregnancy. There had been queasiness, early morning sickness, the same wretched feeling of being at war with my own body. I had had cramps in my thighs, a heaviness in my body as if I was menstruating. Later, I had realized that I could have had thrombosis, cancer, a stroke. Strange that they had all been in my destiny for a while. Perhaps they still are. Who knows? But I had never spoken of these things to Nilima. I had thought her too young. And anyway, it wouldn't have been the right thing to tell Nilima, for the idea of her helplessness infuriated her even more. What do you do with a girl like this? Mukta had appealed to me once. Is Ratty also like this? Ratty had sailed easily and confidently into her womanhood. It was I who had been flustered, unaccountably choky and emotional, remembering how momentous, how agonizing and terrible it had been, that time when the drama of my womanhood had begun. But Ratty, when I had tried to explain these things to her, had only said, "Oh, I know everything," casually, airily. She was neat and tidy, never messy. I found her astonishing, remembering the awkwardness and burden of my adolescence. Poor Mukta, she too seemed perpetually bewildered by the creature she had spawned. I suppose when Aaron died, they had tried to comfort her with the thought of the child who would be born. A son, possibly, would be both her solace and her support. Instead, there was Nilima, proud of her birth. I was born after my father died, I'd heard her bragging. Why are you here? She flung at me now, taking me unawares. Her eyes, light-colored, almost gray, making a piquant contrast to her dark complexion, were as sharp and piercing as a crow's. They made me uneasy. What I thought if I blurt out the truth to her? What if I say we are hiding from our wrongdoings? Nilima, I knew, would enjoy the drama of that. Why not? This is our house. Not really. I mean, it isn't your home now, and you wouldn't come here if you didn't have a reason. The last time you came here was when, who was she, Auntie? Your cousin. When she was here. Uncle hasn't been here in months. And Ratty, I haven't seen her for ages. Ever since you went to stay in Churchgate, Ratty thinks she is, oh, so posh. Nilima acted a sophisticated girl, throwing all her awkwardness aside, and I had to laugh, though I knew it was cheek on Nilima's part, criticizing my own daughter to me. You know what she said to me once? Isn't this a lousy place? Snooty girl, Nilima ended fiercely. She's silly. Oh no, Auntie, she isn't. She's quite smart, at least. Nilima grinned, showing her dazzling, perfectly shaped teeth. She thinks she is. What Ratty thinks or says doesn't matter. This is my house as much as. That Churchgate flat. My uncle lived here, my brother. Mike keeps asking Mum, why are they here? Why have they come? Here, today, she said. I thought she won't come any more now that that man is dead. Man? What man? I asked sharply, feeling breathless with anger and astonishment. That upstairs uncle. She waved her hand upwards. I realized it then, like those women Appa had talked about. The women who covered their faces and imagined themselves invisible. Now, with my eyes open, I found out that the world had been looking at me all the while. Forget it, Auntie, Nilima said with an unchildlike perspicacity. Don't tell me anything you don't want to. You know me, Miss Nosy Parker. She grinned again. Do you know, Auntie, Nilima thankfully went on chattering, that upstairs uncle. Why do you call him that? I rudely interrupted Nilima. You know he didn't like it. Call me by my name, child, I thought of him telling Nilima. How would you like it if I called you my downstairs niece? Sorry, I meant Camet uncle. Do you know, Auntie, his son came from America to sell this place. Now there's an awful bore of a girl called Usha who lives there. Yes, I knew Usha. I'd gone up there in the morning after Mohan went out. I'd unthinkingly climbed up that one familiar flight of stairs. 6 steps, a landing, 7 steps, and there I was at the familiar door. It was this girl Usha who had opened the door. Yes, she asked me as I stood staring at her. Usha, someone called out from inside. Who is it? Who do you want? She asked me, ignoring the inquiry. Usha, the voice impatiently repeated. Who is it? Suddenly I found my voice. It's the wrong house, I'd said and come down again. 7 steps, a landing, 6 steps and home. One morning, soon after Appa's death, I woke up and remembered that he was dead. And I had a sense of loss that was not vague but specific. I thought of that place where he should have been at that moment, his bed. And with a picture of his absence from that bed, there was a terrifying sense of emptiness in me. I felt then that I had not known till that moment what his death, really meant. Blankness. Nothingness. It was like that for me when I came back after my visit to his flat. I had had the same vitals-piercing knowledge of the blankness upstairs, of the emptiness in that place where he should have been, an emptiness that was brought home to me by the sight of Usha. And, even as Nilima chattered about the awfulness of the girl, I struggled to evade the grief. Usha was dead scared when I told her Camet uncle had died right there. She thinks she'll see his ghost in the room if she's alone in it. I told her not to be a fool. When people are dead, they're finished. Gone forever, she ended triumphantly, finally dispersing all the ghosts. The bell rang. That must be my dear mum, Nilima said, getting up languidly. Nilu, what are you doing here? Didn't I say you were not to disturb Jaya, and come and have your bath? Since my coming here, I'd noticed something about Mukta. She was, no, not unfriendly, it wasn't anything so positive. It was more a kind of withholding. But Mukta always, ever since I'd come to know her, had this air of holding back something. I often had a fanciful image of Mukta. I saw her as a dancer who stands stock still while the accompanying singer phrases out the song which she has to transform into dance. Mukta to me was that dancer, holding in her still, mute body all those ideas, emotions and feelings contained in the song. Sometime I'd often thought the singer will stop singing and then it will all flow out of her. Or did the song come to an end for her when Aaron, her husband, fell out of the train and died? Who says I'm disturbing her? She isn't doing anything. Yes, I am. I've been listening to your chatter and now I'm going to make us a cup of tea. Join me, Mukta. Me too, Auntie. Not for you, Neela. Why ever not? As they bickered, I got the tea ready. As I had expected, Mukta refused the biscuits. Not today, Jaya, it's my Saturday today. If it was her Saturday, it was her Monday or her Thursday. Mukta had more days of fasts than days on which she could eat a normal meal. Her self-mortification seemed to be the most positive thing about her. And yet her piety, surely it was that which prompted those fasts, seemed meaningless, since she had already forfeited the purpose of it, the purpose of all Hindu women's fasts, the avoidance of widowhood. Mukta's fasts reminded me of Vanita Mami's pujas and fasts. Perhaps Vanita Mami had begun the discipline when there had still been the hope in her of having children, but she had gone on with her fasts, her ritual circumambulations of the tulsi plant, of the peepal tree, even when their aim had gone beyond her reach, when her uterus had shriveled and her ovaries atrophied. Maybe it had become a habit then a habit she could not forsake. Or maybe, the thought occurs to me now, it had been a kind of flaunting in I's face of her auspicious wifehood as opposed to I's inauspicious widowhood. My Saturday! Oh God, Ma, what does it matter what day of the week it is? All your fasts are so stupid. Give them up, Ma, you're really horribly old-fashioned. Listening to Nilima talk to Mukta, one would have imagined her hostile to her mother. but the musical cadences of Nilima's voice as she called out to her, using innumerable unexpected variations, told a different story. She's right, Mukta, what do you fast for? Look at your arms, just skin and bone. At this rate, you'll vanish into thin air one day. And serves her right if she does, Nilima muttered childishly. Leave her alone, Auntie, she never listens to anyone. She'll go her own way. Nilu, you sound just like Mai when you say that. Like Mai, Nilima was horrified, furious. Ma, you're being nasty. Mean, it's not fair, Mukta, and I had to laugh at her discomfiture. All right, let's go, can't you see Jaya is working? I'm sorry, Auntie, were you writing? Nilima's apologetic, guilty tone grated on me. Why did she regard my writing with such awe? When Nilima talked of writers and poor girl, she considered me one, her iconoclasm gave way. Her judgment, so ruthless and incisive otherwise, faltered. If you really mean that, come home at once. And I thought you wanted me to scrub your hair. I'm getting late for work, and Mai will give it to you having your bath at such a late hour. Oh my, who cares? And you can go, I won't wash my hair today, I'll do it tomorrow. It was a relief to be alone. I'd always treasured my hours of solitude without Mohan and the children. Mohan's constant presence since we came here had become a burden to me. Today he had gone out, tired perhaps of tiptoeing about while I sat at the table, books strewn all over it. Like Mukta and Nilima, he thought I was working. Perhaps he thought I was doing my fortnightly Sita story. But suddenly, Sita had exploded. There was nothing left of her, not even bits and pieces that could be put together. The month's deadline was long past. I could imagine them frantically trying to contact me, their angry mutterings as they failed to get me. It gave me pleasure to think of the blank page where Sita would have been. But of course there would be no blank page. There never could be one. There would be something replacing Sita. But for me, now that I had abandoned Sita, there was nothing, or if there was, I had to search for it. Was that the reason why I was sitting here with the diaries of so many years about me? Looking through these diaries, I realized, was like going backwards, as I burrowed. Through the facts, what I found was the woman who had once lived here, Mohan's wife, Rahul's and Ratty's mother, not myself. But what was that myself? Trying to find oneself, what a cliché that has become, as if such a thing is possible, as if there is such a thing as oneself, intact and whole, waiting to be discovered. On the contrary, there are so many, each self attached like a Siamese twin to a self of another person, neither able to exist without the other. Perhaps this is why I had been so confused when I heard, years later from Kamalakaki, that between me and Dada there had been a baby girl who had died soon after birth. I, with an elder sister. I had felt an entirely different person at the thought. But what bewildered me as I looked through the pages of the diaries was that I saw in them an utter stranger, a person so alien to me that even the faintest understanding of the motives for her actions seemed impossible. There was no clue here, nothing that gave me a chance to connect. I flipped through the pages with a faintly admiring incredulity. Had I really recorded all this? Matter of fact, prosaic, everything was meticulously noted down here. What I had bought, how much I had paid for it, the dates the children's schools had begun, the servants' absences, the advance payments they had taken, the dates of our insurance payments. One could, it occurs to me now, give a composite title to the diaries. The Diaries of a Sane Housewife. Yes, that's right, for each entry, the record of each day, only affirmed the sensible practicality of the woman who had written these things. And yet, as I looked through them, the picture of a life spent on such trivialities scared me. Reading through the entries, I could feel her dwindling, the woman who had lived this life. But of course, the truth was that there were only the bare skeletal outlines of that life in these diaries. Its essential core had been left out. The agonized cries, I can't cope, I can't manage, I can't go on, had been neatly smothered. As also the question that had confronted me every day, is this all? The biggest question facing the woman of these diaries had obviously been, what shall I make for breakfast, lunch, tea, dinner? That had been the leitmotif of my life. All this fuss you make about different dishes, AI had snorted during one of her rare visits to our home. In our day, we cooked 2 meals, and that was that. Nobody expected more. My children, she said sententiously and reproachfully to Rahul and Ratty, that reproach strangely directed to me as well, as if she had forgotten that I was one of those, my children. My children were taught never to scorn any food. AI, it seemed, had forgotten her behavior in Cusam's house. a visit to which had been a prominent feature of our annual stay in Ambigayon when we still lived in Saptagiri. "Venue insists you must visit her," Vanita Mommy would repeat a dozen times. But when we went there, Venue, Cusam's mother, seemed wholly unconcerned, and it was left to Cusam and Vanita Mommy to bustle about energetically. It was Vanita Mommy who made the tea on the primus, pumping it fiercely and vigorously, never noticing that it was burning lopsidedly. It was Dilip, of course, who unclogged the burner with a pin and set the stove right. It was Vanita Mommy who served out the eats on separate dishes for us, stuff she'd got in clandestinely herself a day before. It was Vanita Mommy who chivied the children away from the room in which we sat in an isolated dignity. And it was Cusam who spread the mat for us to sit on, Cusam who collected cups and saucers from all over the house, Cusam who brought out the eats and the tea. This done, both she and Vanita Mommy relapsed into their usual somnolent state, after which, as if by some earlier agreement, Cusam's mother took over, pressing us to eat and drink. It was impossible to resist her warmth, but AI, acting the great lady, sat primly toying with her food. "Don't eat that stuff," she would hiss at me. "It's no good." She herself left most of it on her plate, and once, when leaving, I had looked back at the room in which used cups and plates lay scattered in an ugly disorder. Cusam having already forgotten her role of the daughter of the house, and had seen with horror the children swoop on those leftovers. My children were taught never to scorn any food. Yes, obviously she had forgotten all that when she said that to my children. She had also forgotten what Appa had once said to her. "Your children," he had said to AI, "are spoilt brats. When we were kids, we didn't dare say anything. We had to eat what was on our plates without a word." Mohan and I dutifully passed on the reproach to our children. Mohan had his childhood hardship stories to back up his reproach, but the memories I offered them were more recent. When I spoke to them of how we never ate rice for months, and even on Diwali day, we didn't have a spoonful of sugar in the house, they had stared at me blankly. I suppose these things didn't sound real to them, beneficiaries of the Green Revolution. Even to me, as I go about airily picking plastic bags of food from the loaded shelves of department stores, they seem like made-up stories. With this plethora about us, those days seem a fantasy, but they were real. Once, a line I read somewhere brought them vividly back to me. "Failure of rain for 3 successive years brought about scarcity and near-scarcity conditions in many areas." Yes, we've done away with famine. There's only scarcity now. Perhaps that is why, when I think of those years, the pictures that come to my mind are not of parched lands, bloated corpses, and hovering vultures. No, those macabre pictures belong to a famine. Scarcity is queues, people waiting in long queues tour hours, for a minute bit of sugar, for a small quantity of weevily rice from God knows where, for the almost inedible wheat given by the grace of America. "The chapatis are like cardboard," Gija had phlegmatically told me. Scarcity is Manda, tiny enough then, missing school to stand in the queue and being smacked by Gija when she came away exhausted with all that waiting. But the memory that even now clings barnacle-like to my mind is that of those sad, defeated people who poured into Bombay from the barren countryside. They were everywhere, on pavements and station platforms, under bridges, in parks, huddled in frightened groups on traffic islands at night. No, frightened is not the right word. There was no fear in them, no anger either, only a kind of bewilderment at what had happened to them, at where they found themselves. It was the children who learned fast, who became adept at survival. I can still remember how horrifyingly clean Bombay was then, picked clean by those children of anything that could be eaten, used, bartered, converted, or sold. My diaries, they had nothing of those years in them. Maybe they are best this way, for I would rather not remember some things. But escape is not always possible. As I sat looking at my diaries, one entry brought alive for me a day I would much rather have forgotten. "Went to Juhu Beach in the evening," the entry had tersely noted. And below that, among other things, I had written down the sum we had spent on ice cream. There was somebody else with us that day, a man whose name I could not remember, though his face came back to me vividly enough. He was a colleague of Mohan's whom we were to drop somewhere. But first we had gone to the beach. I sat in the car listening idly to the talk of the men while the children ran off to get their ice creams. When they returned with their cones, a few children followed them. They didn't seem to be professional beggars, for they were neither begging nor importuning. They only followed Rahul and Ratty silently, their eyes following the cones unwaveringly as the children licked them, a hand cupped underneath to catch the drips. "Don't get in until you've finished," Mohan warned them. And so they stood outside, encircled by those staring eyes, a deadly, confining circle. Rahul and Ratty, used to beggars, ignored them, but it was Rahul who first sensed there was something different about these children. I saw him give them uneasy, sideways glances. I saw his licks become more and more hesitant. Finally, he made a dash for the car, trying to open the door with his free hand. "No, Rahul, finish your cone first." Rahul stood close to the door, giving the cone fierce and fast licks. There was something defiant about him as he did that, while the staring children's gaze never wavered. Surely they had moved closer, those hungry eyes, those dark, starving faces. Even I, sitting in the car, felt hemmed in. And then Rahul, flinging the last bit of his cone over his shoulder, dived in with a kind desperation, as if escaping something. But I escaped nothing. I saw the emaciated bodies move in frantic quicksilver movements. I saw the deadly struggle. I saw the swiftness with which the victor disposed of the remnant of Rahul's cone. I saw the steadiness with which the others resumed their watch over Ratty. Ratty had once or twice said shoo to them, but they stood as if mesmerized, as if she had not said anything. "Hurry up, Ratty," I said sharply. "Wait, Mummy, I haven't finished," she said, languorously licking her cone. She went on with casual deliberation, unaware, it seemed, of those macabre spectators. "Ratty," Rahul's voice was shrill, "don't be such a slow coach." "I'll be as slow as I want, it's none of your business." The circle had closed in. A face was peering in at me now, a hand reaching in. I began to roll up the glass while the eye glared balefully at me. This was no child, this was a malevolent stranger. Fear entered into me. I had to roll up the glass, I had to keep her out. Higher and higher I went, the hand still holding on, clinging on as if it would never let go. It was a silent struggle between the two of us, or so I thought, until Rahul screamed out, "Don't, Mummy, don't do that." Startled, I stopped. And it was, I suddenly realized, a child's hand that let go, a child that stepped back from the car. Mohan, looking back with a frown, said in sharp irritation, "What is it, Rahul? What's the matter?" Rahul collapsed against the back of the seat, silent. "Why do you have to scream that way? Like a hysterical girl?" Mohan smiled at me, but I couldn't smile back. He smiled at the man, at the children, perhaps to reassure the man that we were what we looked, a normal, happy family. But Rahul, silent, didn't respond either. And Mohan irritably turned on Ratty. "Hurry up, Ratty, what a time to finish a cone. Eat it up fast, or if you don't want it, give it to one of those kids. I'm sure they'll be grateful for it." "It's become a nuisance," the man said. "Bombay is overflowing with beggars. Well, no rains, no crops, no food, what do you expect? There are relief works, but I suppose for these people it's easier to beg. I know I shouldn't do this, but here, you take this." He held out his hand with a few coins on it. I closed my eyes. Not again. I was not going to watch that battle once again. I opened my eyes only when I heard the door slam hard as Ratty got in sulkily. "Ratty," Mohan said warningly. Later, after we had dropped the man wherever he had to go, Mohan, as if to make up for his irritability, had jovially asked, "Ready for a movie, anyone?" We went to a movie. And yes, the man was right, there were relief works provided. The newsreel showed us pictures of it. Men and women working under a blazing sun, carrying baskets of mud, chipping away at large slabs of stone. Much later, I read that the road which these people had been constructing was never completed, and that a large number of those men and women, unused to stone chipping, had been blinded by tiny chips flying into their eyes. Nothing achieved but statistics in files. And for me, what remained was Rahul's cry, "Don't, Mummy, don't do that." "I know you better than you know yourself," I had once told Mohan. And I had meant it. Wasn't he my profession, my career, my means of livelihood? Not to know him was to admit that I had failed at my job. But why then did the idea of his anxiety not occur to me this time? Was I slipping, losing the clue to him? Or was it that, not caring, I was not as finely tuned to his moods as I had been? "I've been waiting for over an hour," he said even before I could remove my slippers. "Didn't you think of that?" His words, and even more his peevish, complaining tone, gave me a peculiar feeling. These were my lines. It was I who should be saying them. Since we got married, both of us had been scrupulous about playing out our allotted roles. But since coming here, I'd often fumbled, forgotten my lines, what it was I had to do next. And as if the confusion had now reached him, he was speaking my lines, but it was only a momentary lapse. He went back almost immediately to his own script. "Why are you so late? What took you so long?" "She behaves as if she owns me." I'd complained to Dada about AI once, driven to distraction by her constant prying questions. "Why are you so late? Who was that you were talking to? Where are you going now?" "She can't dictate to me. I'll do just what I want," I had declared with bravado. But unreasonable demands always establish their own claims, so that I always had to struggle against a sense of wrongdoing, against an urge to justify, to explain myself. And so, even if the peremptoriness of Mohan's demand angered me, I found myself stammering excuses, though I knew, and he did, that it was he who had asked me to go to Churchgate. Scarcely listening to me, Mohan went on. "I went to the chemist's shop to ring you up. A man there told me there was some trouble in Lal Bog, Peril," I reassured him. It was all over by the time I passed through those areas. The police had dispersed the mobs, and it was peaceful. I kept thinking of that time in Lohanagar. "Remember the time we were surrounded by the workers and how frightened you were?" I'm scared of cockroaches, lizards, nervous about electrical gadgets, hopeless at technical matters, lazy about accounting, almost the stereotype of a woman, nervous, incompetent, needing male help and support. But what puzzles Rue is this? How did I get this way? I'm sure I wasn't always like this. I can remember a time when I was not so full of fears, when the unknown, when darkness and insects did not terrify me so. When did the process of change begin? But I knew, when Mohan spoke of it, that in Lohanagar that time, unless my memory was playing me false, I had not been frightened. On the contrary, there had been, as far as I could recall, a peculiar exhilaration. It had fascinated me, the thought that there was only a sheet of glass between me and the shouting, gesticulating, menacing-looking men I could see through the windscreen of the company car. I had watched them with a curious detachment. It had been the CE's wife who had panicked, and Mohan who had urgently cried, "Driver, don't stop, go on, don't slow down, go on." "Any letters?" Mohan asked me. "Here, anything from the children." Just a small note from Ratty in Rupa's letter. He was not listening to me. He was riffling through the letters intently, looking for something. Not obviously Ratty's letter, for he put that aside. What then? It seemed to me he was waiting for something. He had been insistent that I go to our Churchgate flat to collect the mail. But whatever he was looking for wasn't there. He put the letters away and picked up Rupa's. "Not a word from Rahul since they left. I'm worried about him. Do you think we were wrong, forcing him to go when he wasn't keen?" "Rahul, he's only sulking. You have to ignore him. I know that boy. It gives him pleasure to make us uneasy." The bleak thought came to me that it was I who had chosen the name Rahul for our son. I had named him after that infant by whose side, it is said, his father lingered, looking at him with love, before leaving home forever to become the Buddha. At least, I consoled myself, I had not named him Ananda, after the beloved disciple of the Buddha. Yes, I had thought of that name too. Ananda, that would have been ironic indeed, for I realized it then, little joy out of my son. From the moment of his birth, when I had heard his cry, that infinitely heart-rending, breathless cry of the newborn, he had filled me with a sense of foreboding. My love for him had always been touched with pity, tinged by calamitous colors. Ratty I rarely worried about. She seemed in some way to be armed against unhappiness. But Rahul seemed to me totally vulnerable. I washed my hands and feet and went into the kitchen. Anxious about me, yes, but he had not thought to save me trouble by making any preparations for dinner. I chopped the onions and was washing the rice when Mohan came in. "There's a letter from Vasant." "I know, I read it." The oil was smoking. I threw in the mustard seeds, the onions, poured in the water. The steam rose up, hissing at me. "He knows that I'll pay my share, more than my share always. I've done that every time, and he writes as if..." "What?" "Vasant, reminding me that we have to perform Anna's death. Anniversary ceremonies. It's just like his impudence, asking me to send some money so that he can get things ready. I know nothing will be done until I go there myself. The only thing Vasant will do is to invite people for lunch. Remember how many people he invited for Anna." 13th day. For Mohan, his father's death had already entered the painless region of "do you remember?" "I suppose we have to go." "Go, of course, where's the question of not going? I have to go, I have to do everything, I have to pay for everything. I don't mind that, it's my duty and I do it. What makes me angry is Vasant's reminding me, as if I wouldn't have done anything otherwise, and he never seems to think that I may be having some problems myself. None of them do. They take me for granted. But Vasant doesn't know you have problems. Even if he did, do you think he would care? They're all the same. There's Sudha now, she wants me to meet someone about her husband's transfer, and Prema's Ramesh, he wants to get into engineering. He thinks he can get in through influence. I'm sick of them all. I was tempted to retaliate. It was you who encouraged them to come to you. You were happy enough to help, to show your power. But the words remained unsaid. I knew his mood was best met with silence. And I was right. By the time we sat down to dinner, he was in a more agreeable mood. Remind me, Jaya, to add some extra when I send Vasant the money. It's Revati's birthday this month. She can buy herself what she wants. Of course, I thought. It's the thought of Revati that's brought on his softened mood. Parents and children, for Mohan the tie was sacrosanct. It was not just a question of duty, though that came first to Mohan. Even in our worst days, he had dutifully sent his father some money in the first week of the month, whatever our problems may have been. But there was more than just duty in Mohan's theory. T. Mohan, parents loved their children and children loved their parents because they were parents and children. Period. It was that simple. His own angry cry about his father, why won't he die? That one moment of terrible self-revelation had been soon transmuted by him into something else. I couldn't bear to see him suffering, he had said to me later, as if anxious to explain away his agonized cry, though of course he had not referred directly to that. But his father had not been suffering. He had been lying with a peaceful, almost beatific look on his face, not a trace of pain or sickness on it. It had seemed horrifyingly possible that he could continue that way forever, and yet Mohan had said, I couldn't bear to see him suffering. Now Mohan's face was cheerful when he spoke of Revati, quite unlike his expression when he had mentioned Rahul. Yet Mohan would have been utterly shocked if I had told him that he loved Revati, his brother's daughter, more than he loved his own son. That's your writer's imagination running away with you, he would say with a smile that would put inverted commas round writer, imagination. Don't for God's sake bring that habit of exaggerating into our life. Keep it for your stories, he had exclaimed angrily when I had once said he was hostile to Rahul. How can I be hostile to my own son? And why not? Was not his own father hostile to him? It seems to me that hostility towards our children is deeply ingrained in us, warring with the self-love that parades as parental affection. It is just fortuitous that parental affection has the upper hand more often. Being hostile to my own son, does that make sense? Mohan had asked me. To me it does. For each step the son takes into adulthood, into an active involvement with the world, pushes his father further back into obsolescence and decrepitude. What do you say, Jaya? Mohan was appealing to me. We'll send Revati some money and she can buy herself what she wants. Or maybe you have some idea of what she'd like. You often buy her things, trinkets and all that, don't you? You should know. I wondered how he could be so obtuse. Hadn't he noticed that I'd stopped buying Revati any gifts? I hadn't given her anything since her outburst that day in their home in Saptagiri. We had just finished dinner, and Rama and I were clearing up in the kitchen, not talking, for Rama's taciturnity made me retreat into silence too. And then above the subdued murmurs of our husbands' voices, we had heard Revati's raised voice. Not raised, shrill, it had seemed so strange a tone to emerge from the normally dignified Revati that we had rushed out at once, and seen Revati screaming at her father, don't Appaji, don't ask Mohan Kaka for money, please Mohan Kaka, don't give him any money, oh please. She had burst into hysterical tears. It had been Vasant who had moved to his daughter first, even before Rama could get to her. Putting his arms round her while she crouched in an agony of grief, he had patted her back, murmuring those curious shushing sounds we used to soothe babies. Rama had gone back to her work, leaving her husband to comfort their daughter, but I had stayed on, struck by the envy on Mohan's face as he had watched his brother tenderly hold his daughter. It was then that I had realized the extent of his feelings for Revati. Ratty guesses at his feelings too. She never misses a chance to say something spiteful against Revati. But I know it now, her anger is directed not so much against Revati as against her own father. Why do you care so much for her? She seems to ask with each spiteful remark. Care for me first, care for me most, I'm your daughter. Do you know, Mohan pressed me, if there's anything Revati would like to have? No, I said. She hasn't said anything to me. Sending her money is a better idea. Dinner over, Mohan went to bed, leaving me to clear up. This drudgery was something I'd forgotten since Sadhu came to us as a living servant. Wiping the table, I thought, for some reason, of the women in my Saptagiri Aji's home clearing up after a meal. I thought of them picking up the plates, clearing the mess on the floor with their hands, smearing it with circles of cow dung water while the girls, my cousins, did their job of collecting the drinking water glasses and jugs. Clean vessels which were not to be mixed with others in which food had been cooked or eaten. Everything in its place. Yes, that was how it was. Everything in its place, and each person with an allotted job. Cooking, clearing up had been exclusively female operations. Later, when only two of the girls, my cousins Veena and Sujata, had been left at home, they had invariably quarreled about whose turn it was to clear up. I remembered Sujata angrily bursting out one night when, for some reason, I had slept in Aji's house. "Why can't Jaya do it today? She's here for just tonight and you want her to do the work." The Kakis had squashed her. "Then why can't the boys do it? Janu or Shridhar? Why does it have to be me and Veena?" They had all laughed at that, genuine amused laughter, Sujata herself too, and even Aji had smiled her small, rare smile. I must have forgotten that laughter to have said to Mohan in the early days of our marriage, "Why don't you do the cooking today?" That had been in the first months of my pregnancy, when the smell of oil and spices had made me sick. "You want me to cook?" Mohan had smiled. I should have seen the connection then between Mohan's smile and the laughter of all those women and girls in Aji's house. Instead, I had blundered on stupidly. "I'm sure you cook well. After all, your mother was a cook." A first love, a first affair, a first baby, a first quarrel, I suppose they are all unforgettable landmarks. But few first quarrels could have been as earth-shaking as ours was. In that I learnt so much, I shed so much of my ignorance, my naivety. "My mother a cook, who told you that?" It had been the Kakis, actually. They had mentioned the fact to AI almost casually. After the wedding, of course, trust them for that. AI had said bitterly. But seeing Mohan's face, I had kept this to myself. I would not let any more disastrous facts slip out. It had been too late. His anger had at first taken me unawares. Then, getting the feel of it, I had met his anger with my own, deliberately using it as a weapon. Raging, furious, I had flung accusations wildly at him. As my own anger had grown, I had felt his dwindling, and finally I had found myself raging at a silent, blank-faced man. I had ignored his silence at first, but when it had gone on, not for hours, but for days, it had unnerved me. It was I who had made the first conciliatory move, and only then, when he had spoken to me, had I realized what my anger had done to him. It had shattered him. Until then, I'd never taken my anger seriously. My outbursts had meant very little. AI had taken them with equanimity, Ravi with total indifference, and Appa and Dada with genuine amusement. "You encourage her," AI had reproached Appa once. "And why not? Such splendid tantrums, they deserve to be encouraged." "I hate you," I had raged. "I hate all of you. I know you all hate me. I know you wish I was dead, I know." Come on," Appa had prompted me when I stopped for breath. "I'm sure you can do better. You can't stop at that." It had been impossible not to let the laughter come through at Appa's quips, impossible to keep back the smile that had forced my rigid face to relax. It's over," Dada had shouted approvingly when a smile had broken through at last. With an audience like that, how had it been possible not to let myself go? But with Mohan, it had been different. He had been utterly crushed by the things I had said. "How could you? I never thought my wife could say such things to me. You're my wife," he had kept repeating. It was then that I had realized my awesome power over him. Now it astonished me. How could I have been so stupid? Hadn't I seen that phenomenon, the power of women in my own family? My two Agies, two entirely different women, had been alike in the power they had wielded over their families. Looking back, it seems to me that their children lived their lives reacting against them, lives that had turned out to be, ultimately, a battlefield of dead hopes and ambitions. Appa, who had wanted to join Gandhi's ashram, had had to give up on Agi. Pressure, but he had refused to resume his studies or take up a job. Instead, he had become a partner in a printing press, failed dismally at it, married AI, and left home. Yet he had visited Agi every single day of his life and had died finally in her presence. And there's Shanju Mama, Ai's brother, who had been turned by his mother, my other Agi, from a lively, ambitious young man who had wanted to do his FRCS, into a dull, small-town doctor, married to a woman he had no feelings for, and filling his life with shoddy affairs. With all kinds of women, once even with other Aji's own trusted maidservant Kashabai. But what had really shaken me that day had been the distaste I'd seen on Mohan's face when I'd got into a temper. He had looked at me as if my emotions had made me ugly, as if I'd got bloated with them. Later, when I knew him better, I realized that to him anger made a woman unwomanly. My mother never raised her voice against my father, however badly he behaved to her, he had said to me once. I had learnt to control my anger after that, to hold it on a leash. Terrified of his disapproval, I had learnt other things too, though much more slowly, less painfully. I had found out all the things I could and couldn't do, all the things that were womanly and unwomanly. It was when I first visited his home that I had discovered how sharply defined a woman's role was. They had been a revelation to me, the women in his family, so definite about their roles, so well trained in their duties, so skillful in the right areas, so indifferent to everything else. I had never seen so clear, so precise a pattern before, and I had been entranced by it. Looking at those women, I had begun to think with contempt of Ai's slapdash ways, and of how she could not even hem properly. It was all her fault, I had thought. She had prepared me for none of the duties of a woman's life. So that when Prema had said, "Mohan, you have a button missing," I had not realized that I was expected to feel ashamed, to take the shirt immediately and sew on the missing button. To me, it had seemed a conversation between Prema and Mohan, nothing to do with me at all. And so I had been silent even when Sudha, a spoilt and pert girl, had added poor Manana, "Looks like he'll have to fix his own button." "Certainly not," Prema had retorted. "Here, Mohan, give it to me." It had not occurred to me that this too had been intended as a reproach, even though Prema had made it explicit by raking me from head to toe with an elder sister of your husband's look. But soon, seeing Prema, Vimala, Sudha and their widowed aunt cooking effortlessly and in unison, I had despised Vanita Mommy afresh for her agonized and incompetent floundering about in the kitchen, for all her banging of pots and pans, all her frantic scurrying that had not even resulted in a good meal. These women of Mohan's family were right, I had decided. I would pattern myself after them. That way lay, well, if not happiness, at least the consciousness of doing right, freedom from guilt. And so, when something was not done well or on time, a button missing or a meal cooked badly or too delayed, I had cringed in guilt. And when I had been praised for anything, I'd been so ridiculously pleased. I almost wag my tail like a dog that's been patted by its master, I had told Kamet. Don't try to act the martyr now. It's all your fault. You really enjoy it, don't you? What? Making others dependent on you. It increases your sense of power. And that's what you really want, all you bloody looking after others. Caring for others' women. Putting away the table-wiping rag, I thought I must reassure Usha. She needn't be scared. Kamet's ghost isn't there in her house where he died. It's here in mine. Jaya, the ghost scampered away with a grin at the sound of Mohan's voice. Coming, I'm just setting the curds. All done at last. I switched off the light and left the kitchen to the cockroaches. Jaya, is there something wrong with our phone? I couldn't get through when I tried to ring you up. It was engaged. Were you talking to someone? No, oh yes, how did I forget? It was Ravi. He rang up. He said he'd been trying the whole day. Oh, and what did you tell him? Nothing. I said the children have gone on a trip with Rupa and Ashok and that I'd gone out in the morning. And what does Ravi want? Poor Ravi, but he deserved that. I had no illusions about my younger brother. God knows, he says he wants to see me. He wouldn't tell me why, but he was very insistent. I've agreed to meet him near Dadar TT tomorrow. I said I'm doing some shopping there. You shouldn't have, oh well, I suppose you couldn't refuse. But I don't like your going away. I don't like being alone here without you. I feel lost. As I was changing, he said, I'm glad, Jaya, you haven't put on any weight. Most women get shapeless at your age. You're still the way you were when we got married. So I knew the day would not end in hostility after all. His consciousness of me touched me like a caress. Later, when we got into bed and the lights were off, there would be caresses and kisses, and then lovemaking, a silent, wordless lovemaking. God, how terrible it was to know a man so well. I could time it, almost to the second, the whole process of our lovemaking, from the first devious wooing to the moment he turned away from me, offering me his hunched back. At first we are walking together. Then he goes on ahead and I am left behind. I am unperturbed and go on at my own pace, walking now between rows of houses, so close to one another that there is a slight sense of claustrophobia. For some reason, I have to pass through a house, but it is impossible for me to climb the flight of stairs that leads to the house. As I struggle, a girl comes to me. She is not surprised by my presence. On the contrary, she accepts it as if she had expected me. She helps me up, but suddenly when I am in the house it comes upon me with a sense of shock that I am alone, that I have been left behind. I will never be able to find him now. The realization that I am lost overwhelms me. Worse, I do not know where I am, where I have to go, and how I can find him. The disorientation is total. The girl has helped me into a room, and I find myself surrounded by a number of young girls. They are all smiling, and the thought comes to me they are on my side. But none of them can help me. I am utterly helpless and really ill now. I lie down, stiff as a corpse, and the faces around me change from curiosity to sympathy. The girls talk in low tones among themselves, discussing my predicament, while I continue to lie there, paralyzed, aphasic. Suddenly, he is there in the room. He comes straight to me through the girls. I am up in a moment, my illness, my helplessness quite gone. I run to him. "Come," he says, "we have to hurry. The taxi is waiting. If we don't hurry, it will go away." "Where is it?" "It's waiting near the Portuguese church. Hurry up." But as I run after him, I realize that it is too late anyway. We will never be able to make it. We will never be able to get away. It is all my fault. All my fault. On that fearful thought, I woke up. "Foo dreams, who cares?" Dada used to say if I tried to tell him my dreams. "I do, that's who," I would retort. And there was Appa who, like me, had cared immensely about dreams. We had told each other our dreams. We had taken them seriously, our own dreams, that is, not the others. It had been like an unwritten pact between us that he would listen to my dreams, so that I, in turn, would listen to his. Appa's dreams had always been fantastic. I'm almost sure he made them up, for who could really dream of Hitler and Churchill? While mine had been, still were, cozy ones of known places peopled with familiar faces. Only occasionally did I have dreams about trains leaving me behind or carrying me away, separating me from someone I wanted to be with. Sometimes I was trapped in ghostly passages, and there were sepulchral, deep voices that filled me with horror. Most of these nightmares slid away as I woke up, leaving me with nothing more substantial than a clammy sense of fear and dread. But this dream, foo dreams, who cares? I realized I'd said the words aloud and turned quickly, guiltily to Mohan. His steady breathing reassured me, but the sight of his face gave me a sudden jolt of recognition. The house in my dream, I knew it. It was the one Mohan had pointed out to me in Saptagiri, saying, "It was here that it all began." Both Mohan and I grew up in Saptagiri, but our memories make them two entirely different worlds. This house linked those worlds. It was next door to Appa's youngest sister's, Savitriadia's, house. We had gone there for lunch, Mohan and I, on one of our visits to Saptagiri. When Mohan, suddenly halting by Savitriadia's gate, had said with a smile, "It was here," pointing to the house next door, that it all began for me. It had been only later at night that, lying in bed, he had told me the story of how it all began for him therein. Yes, the name came back to me suddenly too, a curious, unforgettable name, Crossword House. And after I had heard the story, I realized that his smile, as he had pointed out the house to me, had been for the boy who had been invited there for a meal out of charity. "My mother was not a cook," Mohan had said to me angrily. But Vasant, who could never dissemble, even to himself, had told me once, "Whenever mother was called out to help in the cooking anywhere, it was a great day for us. We could be sure of a good meal that day. Invited or not, there we were, all of us, at the right time. Except Manana, he never would go. I can remember Anna raging at Ava once for taking some food home for him. 'Don't make beggars of the children,' he said, but she always brought home some stuff for him, and Manana never touched it. I wasn't so fussy," he'd grinned at me. "I didn't want to go to that housewarming," Mohan had said, speaking that night of Crossword House. "But I had to. I didn't dare displease the old man." That was the first time I had heard of the old man, Mohan's patron, who had paid his fees the last 2 years of school. How distant Mohan must have felt then from the boy who'd taken a stranger's charity to complete his schooling. He had actually smiled at the memory of the old man's weekly grilling, and the long sermons he had to submit to before he could get 6 rupees for his fees. It was a small price to pay for the comfort of knowing that my fees would be paid on time, that I didn't have to stand in front of Anna each morning and ask him for money. And I didn't mind the old man's pompous manner, really. He was a lonely old man. His wife was dead, and his children were all grown up and married. They all stayed together. It was the second son who won a crossword contest and decided to build his own house and get away from the joint family. I don't think he'd ever talked to me till then. That son, I mean. None of them in the house did. But he came into the room when I was with the old man, and the old man said, "Have you invited this boy to your housewarming?" And the son had to do it. "You come with me," the old man said to me. "We'll go there together," which had made it impossible for Mohan to stay away. Perhaps that had been the old man's intention, or maybe it hadn't been all altruism, for Mohan had had to get a tonga for the old man, help him into it, help him out of it. And then he said to me, "Go and have your food now, find a place for yourself." I knew where my place would be, Mohan had said with the first touch of bitterness he had shown till then. Yes, I knew it too, from what I had seen in my Aji's house in Saptagiri, from what Vasant had told me of their childhood. I knew Mohan would have been relegated to some corner, a dingy passage, with the bare, dirty feet of the serving men almost treading on his woven leaf plate as they went about serving the guests. Mohan and his like, all poor Brahmin boys, would be served carelessly, almost contemptuously, the salt and the chutneys half on the plate, half on the ground, the leaf bowl overturned when the dal was slopped in from a height, the liquidy mess streaming out of the plate. And then they came in, those 3 women. No, Mohan had corrected himself. One of them was just a girl, 16 or 17 maybe. The way he had spoken of them, it had been obvious to me that those women had stayed in his mind through all the years, fixed in an image of bizarre beauty. From his description, they had appeared to me like women in a surrealist painting. Eyebrows arched in an impossibly high, haughty curve, hair swept up above their necks, diaphanous saris floating about them in an airy abandon, giving them an appearance of floating rather than walking. That was the first time I had seen such women. They were so different from all the women I'd seen until then. And the perfume that came with them, it came to us before they did, actually, and lingered in. That dirty passage long after they had gone, I didn't even know it was perfume. I thought women like them smelt that way naturally. I imagined their fragrance was a part of them. They had been speaking in English, Mohan had told me. I suppose to say that it was unusual would seem amusing today when even Jija and Tara are planning to send Tara's 2 sons to an English school. But for Mohan, it had been part of the exotic aura around them that those women spoke English. They spoke it as if it was a real language, easily and fluently, quite unlike the English I'd heard till then. They stood in the doorway for a while. From the way our host fawned on them, I imagined they were rich relations. As they were leaving, the girl said something. I can't remember what she said, but I can remember how wonderful it seemed to me to be able to talk like that, to be so easy and confident, and how terrible it was to be shut out, to be different. For Mohan, I had realized as he spoke to me, the women had been a revelation. He had found it hard to convey his exact feelings to me, but I had grasped them from his faltering words. Those women had given him his first vision of a different kind of life, a life that had none of the poverty, the shabbiness and ugliness, the rigid rules and rituals he had known till then. They gave him a glimpse of another world, a world he knew then that he longed to be in, to be a part of. Until this point, I had listened to Mohan intently, fascinated by his story, seeing a different Mohan altogether. And then he had said, jerking me abruptly out of my detached listener's pose, Jaya, the first day I met you at your Ramu Kaka's house, you were talking to your brother Dinkar, and somehow you sounded so much like that girl. I think it was at that moment that I decided I would marry you." So it was Appa whom I had to thank for Mohan. It was Appa who had sent all his 3 children to an English school, a convent school, while all the Kaka's children had gone to Kannada schools. Aji, who had perhaps finally reconciled herself to the fact of Appa's having married a Marathi girl instead of a good Kannada girl, had been very disapproving and scornful of his sending us to English schools. "No good will come of sending your children to a Padre school. They'll forget all our customs, they might even become Christians. You know how these Padres are," she had prophesied darkly. Let them learn good English, Appa had replied. It's going to be more useful to them than being good Brahmins. And so I had been ready for Mohan, who, he had told me this soon after we got married, had wanted to marry a girl who can speak good English. That statement had amazed me as much as Dada's words when he had first told me about Mohan. I believe, Dada had said, that what he wants is an educated, cultured wife. He says he isn't bothered about dowry, money, and all that. An educated, cultured wife. Did all men go about with precise ideas like that, I had wondered. For girls, for me anyway, and for most of the girls I knew well, it had been a vague and nebulous search. We were looking for something, but what we were looking for we did not know, or if we did, we were unwilling to give it a name. If we had been forced to name it, the thing we were trailing, I suppose we would have called it love, something we saw in movies between Raj Kapoor and Nargis, Cary Grant and Deborah Kerr. It meant a handsome young man saying, "I love you," a handsome young man somehow far removed from all the real young men we did see. We tried this garb of love on all the young men we came across, wondering each time, will this fit? And then, as we grew into young women, we realized it was not love, but marriage that was the destiny waiting for us. And so, with each young man, there was the excitement of thinking, will this man be my husband? The future stretched ahead, full not of possibilities, but of cozy, comfortable certainties. It had been our parents who had taken charge of these vague desires of ours and translated them into hard facts. It was like the game we had played as children on our buttons, tinker, tailor, soldier, sailor. Only for us it had been doctor, engineer, government official, college lecturer, if the young man was of the right sort, that is. For me, the refrain had stopped at engineer. He's an engineer, Dada had said, and stopped, looking for my response. Unhun, what else? That's the most important thing, you silly, if you want to know more. Of course I do. Okay, I'll tell you all. He had cleared his throat. He's quite good-looking, no squint, no glasses, even teeth, that's Kamalikaki. He has a good career, hard-working, ambitious, will go far, that's Ramukaka. No vices, doesn't smoke or eat in hotels, comes from a good Brahmin family, that's Shantakaki. And what does my dear brother say? Me. Dada had hesitated, his smile had wavered, come back as he began. He'll be good to you, keep you in order, beat you only once in a while, okay, I'll be serious. You want to know what I think? I'm all for it. He seems a very decent chap, soft-spoken and quiet maybe, but determined, you know. He'll make his way, he's very independent. And he has a good job, as junior engineer in the new steel plant at Lohanagar. What more do you want? When I didn't know what I wanted, how could I have said what more I wanted? Instead, I had asked Dada, curious to know how my being had been crystallized into words, and what did you and Ramukaka tell him about me? I don't know about Ramukaka. As for me, yes. We were discussing my marriage. But our tones kept our talk on the edge of flippancy. I told him my sister's a pampered, bad-tempered only daughter. You wouldn't dare. You'd never get rid of me by talking that way. Smart girl, eh? Okay, I said my sister's a BA honors, a clever, well-treated girl. She knows who wrote Svapnavasavadetta, prefers Trollope to Dickens, loves Jane Austen, adores Mukesh and Jita. Dutt cries at soppy songs. And what did he say to that? He said, I'm glad, I want a well-educated, cultured wife. Cultured, damn, Dada, I can't possibly marry a man who uses that word. Call it off, I mean take it back, withdraw it, whatever it is you do to a proposal you've sent out. Don't be a fool. Dada had become wholly serious at last. These are all trifles. They matter. They don't. After a while, you won't even notice these things. Dada was certainly shrewd, far-seeing, and prophetically right, though I had no idea of it then. Nor had I known Dada's motives. Only later had I come upon them with a painful awareness. Dada had wanted me off his hands. He had wanted to be free of his responsibility for an unmarried younger sister, so that he could go ahead with his own plans. After Appa's death, the Kakas had never let Dada forget his role as the man of the house. And so Dada had cleverly maneuvered me into a position from which not marrying Mohan would have been childish, irresponsible, and unfair to Dada. I know I'm only your brother. I know I have no real right to tell you what to do, if only Appa had been here. And if there had been no reason why I should have married Mohan, there had been no reason not to marry him either. But it had been AI who had given that last shove, AI who had finally made up my mind for me. Jaya can't marry that man. But why, AI? Ramukaka says it's a perfectly good match. Ramukaka, you talk as if he's an oracle. Do you think he cares? Do you think he'd have said the same thing if it had been his daughter's marriage? Of course. I know he wanted to propose Sujata to him, but Mohan was keen on a convent-educated girl, so he proposed Jaya instead. Listen, Dinu, I know your kakas. I know both of them better than you ever will. I stayed with them all for a whole year, remember? But of course, if his words matter more than mine, if you think he cares more for Jaya's happiness than I, her mother, do, I have no more to say. Come on, AI, don't be unreasonable. You shouldn't be prejudiced against a man just because you don't like the kakas. Jaya's lucky really to have this opportunity. And look, you'll be getting a fair sonin. Law, he's fairer than Jaya. What's wrong with my Jaya's color? And does the color of one's skin matter? This from AI, who had so often said regretfully about me. Why is she so dark when both the boys are fair? Dark, Appa would retort. She has a golden brown wheat color, the color of honey, he said, lingering lovingly over the words, and then ended up grinning like me. And there was AI saying, does the color of one's skin matter? You know you're just trying to be difficult. You know I was joking. I know AI, his being fair doesn't matter, but he is a decent chap, he has a good job. And that family of his, what about them? I know they're orthodox, old-fashioned people. There's that shabby house of theirs and all those children. If you think I'm giving my daughter to such people, by the time they had finished wrangling and Dada had restored I's good humor, as I had known he would, I had made up my mind. I would marry Mohan. The decision would be mine, not Ramukaka, not Dada's, not I's. I would not be given to anyone. At that moment, this had mattered the most, but behind this had been so many thoughts. I would be getting away from Ambagayan. He wasn't asking for money. The kakas and Shanju Mama wouldn't have to make up the money for my dowry. Perhaps it had also mattered that Mohan was good-looking. He still is. He hasn't changed very much since then, except for his greater air of assurance and that small protuberance of his abdomen, that bulge that is almost the hallmark of a man of our class. But all this is actually a futile exercise, trying to figure out why I married Mohan. The truth is that he had decided to marry me. I had only to acquiesce. AI had been furious when I had agreed. She had her revenge by preventing me from getting married from Saptagiri Aji's house as I had wanted to. It was what the kakas had also wanted, but AI had been adamant. Mohan, I'd said the name to myself after we got married, but it had tasted unfamiliar. The man, too, we were married, yet he was a stranger. Intimacy with him had seemed a grotesque indecency. Surely, I'd thought, it was not expected of me, not at once anyway. We would achieve it gradually, by degrees or stages, I'd optimistically reassured myself. Whereas for Mohan, it had been extremely simple. We were married, we were husband and wife, so everything, according to him, was permissible. He had taken it for granted that I thought the same way. And so perhaps it was only I who had been surprised when intimacy had come, all of a sudden, with the physical link. We had slipped into it with a precipitancy that had taken me unawares. The truth had been that if I was ignorant, so was he. But somehow, after those first few days of clumsy fumbling, it had been suddenly all right. They had fallen into place then, all those vague longings, all those suppressed thoughts, all those whispers, the hints, even the things we had so blithely called love and romance. It was then that I had discovered what it was all about, the songs, the poems, the stories. This, I'd thought, feeling his heavy, damp body on mine, this is the real truth. Sensual memories are the coldest. They stir up nothing in you. As I thought of those days of my feelings and then looked at the man lying beside me, nothing stirred in me. Those emotions and responses seemed to belong to two other people, not to the two of us lying here together. In any case, whatever my feelings had been then, I had never spoken of them to him. In fact, we had never spoken of sex at all. It had been as if the experience was erased each time after it happened. It never existed in words. The only words between us had been his question, "Did I hurt you?" And my answer, "No." Each time after it was over, the same question, and my reply too, invariably the same, "No." First there's love, then there's sex. That was how I had always imagined it to be. But after living with Mohan, I had realized that it could so easily be the other way round. Love. Yes, what else could I call it but love when I thought of how I had longed for his physical presence, when I remembered how readily, almost greedily, I had responded to his touch. What else could I name it when I thought of the agony it had been to be without him, when his desires, his approval, his love, had seemed to be the most important thing in my life. It seems to me now that we had, both of us, rehearsed the roles of husband and wife so well that when the time came we could play them flawlessly, word perfect. There had been a time, it came back to me, when I had so faithfully followed all the edicts laid down by the women's magazines. They had been my Bible, and I had pored over the wisdom contained in them. Don't let yourself go. How to keep your husband in love with you. Keep romance alive in a marriage. The quality of charm in a woman, where does it come from? Ugh! Thinking of all that, I felt nothing but pity for the girl who had sat and creamed her face at night, rubbing the cream in circles as she had read she should. Round, and upward strokes when you came to the neck. I had brushed my hair religiously too, 50 strokes on either side, 100 strokes altogether. Years later, long after I had given up all these exercises, the thought had come to me. It was ridiculous. He would have slept with me faithfully twice a week, whether I creamed my face or not, whether I brushed my hair 100 times or not, whether I wanted him to or not. Yes, there had been that too, yet I had always been apprehensive of not pleasing him as a woman. "Why don't you?" he had said one day, looking at me intently, critically. "Cut your hair up to here," his hand lightly brushing my shoulder, like Mara's wife. And so in a few days I had cut my hair up to here like Mara's wife and Gupta's wife and Yadav's wife and Raman's wife. And AI had cried and said, "Have you gone mad, all your lovely hair?" Mohan wanted me to cut it. Mohan! Poor AI, I'd thought. She's forgotten what being a wife means. Poor AI, I'd thought from my vantage position of being a wife. But sex becomes, in the final count, to a great extent extraneous, if my feelings for him had had their beginning in the act of sex. They had grown, like some monster child, way beyond it. It seemed like a distant dream. The time when I had lived in a constant panic that he would die. I had clung to him at night, feeling with relief the warmth of his body, stroking his chest, letting my palms move with his even deep breaths. The thought of living without him had twisted my insides. His death had seemed to me the final catastrophe. The very idea of his dying had made me feel so bereft that tears had flowed effortlessly down my cheeks. If he had been a little late coming home, I had been sure he was dead. By the time he returned, I had, in my imagination, shaped my life to a desolate widowhood. The strength of my feelings for him had both shamed and terrified me. I had never confessed my frenetic emotions to him. It had seemed like a disease, a disability I had to hide from everyone. Often, to get out of all that emotional extravagance, I had rationalized. We're all frightened of the dark, frightened of being alone. And so we cling to one another, saying, "I love you, I want you, I need you." Often I had told myself, love is a myth, without which sex with the same person for a lifetime would be unendurable. Sometimes, like the time I read an American poet's confession of her guilt because she just couldn't get along without her husband, it had seemed hopeless. I would never be able to shake off this monstrous burden. It was time, finally, and not any rationalization, that took away the agony out of my feelings for Mohan. I'd begun to think that my need was now less. I could stay apart from him without a twinge. I could sleep with him, too, without desire. And yet that cry of his today, it shook me up. His procedure had always been so unvaried that I could almost stand back and watch the whole thing from a distance, the same positions, the same movements, the same time. But if the predictability of his actions had often dulled my response, the variation from it today filled me with terror. It was that cry of his, a soft cry he immediately stifled, a cry so strange that it chilled me to my bones. Why did he cry out like that? It sounded like a cry of despair. His very back, when I looked at it after he had settled himself to sleep, spoke to me of desolation, the idea of which filled me with guilt and compunction. I had failed then, failed at what I had been trying to achieve since we got married. Yet there was a curious and cruel comfort in thinking that perhaps he had learned at last what I had found out long ago, the fact that it is the act of sex that really affirms your aloneness. I remembered the day this knowledge had come to me. I had been eager that day for sex, as eager as he had been. I had responded passionately to him, and then it was over. He had turned away from me. It had been as usual. There had been nothing unusual about any of his actions, or mine either, nothing that marked that night out from the rest of our times together. But lying there, my body still warm and throbbing from the contact with his, it had come to me in one awful moment that I was alone. The contact, the coming together, had been not only momentary but wholly illusory as well. We had never come together, only our bodies had done that. I had begun to cry then, despairingly, silently, scared that I would wake Mohan up, trying desperately to calm myself. Man and woman, it was then that I realized the deep chasm between the two. They are separated forever, never more than at the moment of total physical togetherness. Had he realized this? Was this the reason for his cry? I felt sorry for him, the remote pity of one who had been through it all. Suddenly I realized that he had not asked me, "Have I hurt you?" I'd often wondered, what if I say yes? What will that do to him? But I knew I would never say it. I could not. Even if I could no longer call it love, the emotion that governed my behavior to him, there was still. The habit of being a wife, of sustaining and supporting him, that made cruelty to him impossible. And a habit is something that is infinitely more difficult to get rid of. I knew how impossible it had been for me not to be harsh and cruel to Kusum, even when I had wanted to help. How difficult it always was not to resent I's interference, Dada's indifference. I was startled out of my thoughts by Mohan. "Jaya." "What? I thought you were asleep." "No, I can't get to sleep. I've been thinking all kinds of thoughts, you know." He turned deliberately to me, pulling his blanket over himself. "Why don't you take up a job?" "A job, me?" "Yes, I thought. But you never wanted me to. That time when I wanted to try my hand at teaching. Oh, that was different. Circumstances were different then. But now maybe you should try." "What can I do? And who'll give me a job?" "A magazine, one of the weeklies. Surely you should be able to get something." "I don't know, you can't get any job just like that, and at my age I've no experience either. And no professionalism." I could see it clearly, as if I was looking through a microscope, the half-heartedness with which I had worked. "Take yourself seriously, woman," Kamat had said to me. "But you've been writing. It's not the same. You can try. You don't lose anything by trying." Suppose by some chance I lose my job? The possibility lay between us, making conversation impossible. After a while he went on, "Thank God you have your column, and your Sita fortnightly, and your stories, that's something. Not much money in it, but..." Now, I thought, now is the time to tell him I've abjured them, all those things, Sita, my weekly column, my stories. But I said nothing. It was so much simpler to say nothing, so much less complicated. Part 3. As I wove my way through the tables, Ravi in a corner raised his hand to attract my attention. Ravi didn't really have to do anything to attract attention. He was conspicuous in any crowd. He was the best-looking of the three of us, having Appa's height and sharp features and I's clear complexion. Recently, he'd started putting on weight, but that hadn't yet affected his startling good looks. I wedged myself into a corner by his side, struggling to find some room for my shopping basket at our feet. "Do you really come all this way to do your vegetable shopping?" Ravi asked me with a smile that to me looked supercilious. "Unhun, sometimes, for certain things." I didn't have any qualms about lying, certainly not to Ravi, who was himself an accomplished hand at deceit. What I did resent was the way Ravi could make me feel dishonest even when I was speaking the truth. "Oh, come on now," he would say, impelling me to elaborations and explanations, as if I was propping up a lie. And when I was lying, he made me feel an inept, bumbling amateur. Even as a child, Ravi's lies had been more calculated and premeditated than a child's usually are. He had never fooled Dada and me, but AI, believing him, had often turned on us angrily. "Don't be so harsh with the little fellow," she would say. And to me, "And you, Jaya, what kind of an elder sister are you? Is this the way for a girl to treat her younger brother?" I had rarely been able to explain or justify myself, but nothing AI had said could make me act the protective, loving, elder sister with Ravi. There had been something inordinately sly about Ravi even then. He had secretive ways, and had never minded that we left him alone. Dada and I, perhaps that was why I never had the link of shared childhood with him that I had with Dada. I had only to remember his maddening tenacity as a child, the way he had battled without anger, without hostility almost, uncaring of anything but getting what he wanted, to be overcome by that childhood exasperation of mine against him. I could still vividly remember our struggle over a window seat in a train. I had captured it first, but Ravi, determined to wrest it from me, had tried to push me out. It had seemed the most important thing in the world at that moment to have that seat, not to let him have it. I would have died before surrendering it. Yet when AI had seen us struggling, Ravi himself had never appealed for help. He had fought his own battles. I had had to give it up. But there was one happy moment of Ravi's childhood that was, for some reason, trapped in my mind, beautifully iridescent, like the bubbles in a glass paperweight. We had gone out to a restaurant in Ambigayon, and Ravi had said something cheeky in a loud voice, at which everyone there had looked at him and smiled, smiles of affectionate pleasure. Each time I met Ravi, I thought of that child, beaming with pride at being the center of attention, and looking at the man he had become, I felt a thickening in my throat as if I was about to burst into tears. It's not just that life is cruel, but that in the very process of our birth we submit to life's cruelty. "What will you have, Jayatai?" he asked me now. The waiter was waiting to take our orders. "Just a cup of tea." "Nothing more, sure, okay." 2 teas and let me see, what shall I have? I missed my lunch today. His finger slid over the items on the greasy menu card. "Right, we'll have 2 teas, 1 tomato omelet and 1 puri bhaji. I've just returned from Ambigayon," he said in almost the same breath. I'd been wrong thinking there was no link between us. There was this, the family. "I know, you told me that yesterday." "Did I? And did I tell you Vanita Mommy as well?" "No, what's wrong with her?" He poured the water from his glass down his throat in a steady stream without a pause. I watched his Adam's apple move up and down. "Is it anything serious?" I asked when he had finished. "Serious? AI says no, but Shanju Mama says it might be. He wants you to go there. They were all grumbling about you. Did you hear me, Jayatai? They were complaining that it's ages since you visited them." "I like that. I was there for nearly 10 days, now when was that? Yes, during the Christmas vacation. That's quite some time back, isn't it?" "Well, what do they expect? A visit every month." I knew I sounded harsh and callous, but I couldn't help myself. The truth was that the thought of the 3 old people in Ambigayon made me uneasy.